My in-laws laughed when I arrived with nothing. They didn't know why I had been invited. The drive from our apartment in Asheville to the Caldwell family house in Flat Rock takes 40 minutes when traffic is light. I had driven the route often enough to know every pothole, every yield sign, every curve that flirted with the French Broad River under the hill. Derek sat in the passenger seat with his reading glasses on, scrolling through something on his phone, and I was grateful for the quiet because my stomach had been knotted since I brushed my teeth that morning. When the formal paper invitation had arrived in the mail 2 weeks earlier, I had read it 4 times before I handed it to my husband. The card said the family was invited to a private dinner at the home on Saturday, August 9th at 6 o'clock business casual, and at the bottom in a separate line, Della had written by hand Marin, "Please come early, if you can. I would like to speak with you." I had read that small sentence as a simple kindness from a grandmother-in-law who had always gone out of her way to befriend me. Now, sliding past the second yield sign on 64, I was no longer sure what kind of invitation I was holding. I had packed nothing. Not a covered dish, not a bottle of wine, not even a small bouquet from the grocery on the way. Derek had asked me 3 times the day before if I was going to bring something, and each time I had told him that Della's handwritten note had not asked for anything, and that hot food in August made the car smell like a cafeteria. He had raised an eyebrow at that, the way he does when he wants to be polite but does not want to argue, and then he went back to whatever he had been doing. I had assumed perhaps too generously that Della, who was 83 and losing her eyesight, would appreciate the simplicity of my arrival. I had thought that the least I could carry through her door was my own self. The Caldwell house sat on 7 acres at the end of a gravel lane lined with crepe myrtles blooming in August the way fireworks do. I parked behind a black Cadillac I did not recognize, beside Loretta's pearl-white Lexus, and felt the first proper wave of dread settle in my chest. 3 cars I did not know meant 3 people I did not know. Derek got out, smoothed the front of his shirt, and came around to open my door, which he only does when he is also nervous. I had not worn anything special, just a plain cotton dress in light blue with a modest neckline that Loretta always approved of and never actually complimented. The only jewelry I wore was the thin gold chain my own mother had given me at my wedding, the same one she had worn at hers. The front door opened before we reached the porch. Loretta stood there in a peach-colored blouse and pressed slacks, a glass on ice already in her hand. She looked me up and down with the quick, frank appraisal she had always used, the kind that takes inventory of your shoes, your hemline, your hands, and concludes in a single second whether you have done enough. Behind her, Hank leaned on the newel post in the foyer with an expression that could have passed for mild amusement. Tessa was already halfway up the staircase, phone pressed to her ear, and did not turn around to greet us. None of them had come outside. None of them had come down the porch steps. None of them had said my name. "You must be hot," Loretta said finally. "Come in. We're all in the sunroom." She stepped aside without touching my shoulder, in the way she usually did, and I walked into the house holding absolutely nothing in my hands. The foyer smelled of lemon polish and the faint remains of roasted vegetables, and I remember thinking that Della always liked the front of the house to smell clean even when the rest of it was busy. The clock on the wall ticked in the way those clocks do when no one is speaking. I had taken 2 steps inside, and Hank said, with the practiced grin of a man who enjoys an obvious joke, "Marin, did you bring us anything tonight?" He said it lightly, the way he says things at Thanksgiving when he has had 2 glasses of wine and wants the room to laugh. The room laughed. Tessa laughed from halfway up the stairs and did not even turn around. Loretta tipped her glass toward Hank and gave the smallest acknowledging nod, the kind you give a joke told by a person whose jokes you have always supported. Derek shifted his weight beside me, and I felt his hand brush my elbow as if he wanted to take my arm and stopped himself. I said, smiling the smile I had learned to wear in moments like this, "No, sir." Della did not ask. I came as I was. Hank made a small sound in his throat, half chuckle and half dismissal, and turned back toward the sunroom. "Let's not keep everyone waiting," he said, and walked away. Derek looked at me. He looked at the door. He did not ask if I was okay because he knew the answer, and because asking it in his parents' foyer would have made a small thing into a large one. He put a hand on the small of my back, and we walked together toward the sunroom. I was carrying nothing. My hands were empty, and for 1 second I wished I had brought anything at all, even a single lemon from the store, just so that it would not be true that I had walked in empty. The sunroom was the prettiest room in Della's house and the room she used least. It had wicker chairs, soft white curtains, 3 ceiling fans, and a view of the back garden where the grandsons had built her a small fountain years ago. Tonight the wicker had been pushed to the edges, and a long folding table had been set in the middle, covered with a pale linen cloth, with 8 chairs arranged around it, and silver forks polished to a sheen. I had never seen this room used like that. Della preferred everyone to eat at the wide farm table in the kitchen, where she could move around and pour wine herself, and where the conversation could not be tempted to grow too formal. A dining in the sunroom was an event. 11 people were already in the room when we came in. I did not recognize half of them. There was a tall man with white hair and a stiff collar standing by the fountain window, holding a small leather folio against his chest. There was a younger woman in a sleeveless navy dress whose name I could not recall, even after she turned and waved at me as if she knew me well. There were 2 gentlemen in matching gray suits who turned out to be Della's lawyer and his partner, both from a small firm in Tryon. There was a woman in coral lipstick who introduced herself as Della's physical therapist, a friendly sort named Annie Voss, and who told me, when I asked how Della was doing, that Della had asked her to come tonight for support. There was Derek's cousin Garrett, who looked at me with the sympathetic, embarrassed expression he always wore at family events when he knew something I did not. And there was Tessa's husband Reginald, who gave me a small polite nod and went back to his conversation with Hank near the bar. Della was not in the room. That was the strange thing. Her house, her invitation, her carefully arranged linen, and not a single sign of her. The folding table had a small place card in front of the chair at its head, and I could read it in Della's own handwriting even from where I stood. It said Marin Caldwell. Mine was the only name that had been printed, not handwritten. Every other card around the table had been handwritten. Mine had been typed, formal, as if I had been invited with the seriousness of a witness rather than the casualness of a granddaughter-in-law. I sat down at my seat, which put me at the head of the table next to the carved chair Della used when it was her turn to preside. Derek sat beside me on my left, and on my right sat a comfortable silence. The lawyer came over with the leather folio and introduced himself as Marvin Albright, and he shook my hand twice as if making certain I would remember him. He said, "With the formality lawyers use when they are about to be formal about something, Mrs. Caldwell. It is a pleasure to see you again. Della has spoken of you often." That was the second time someone had used my name tonight, after Hank had used it to make a joke, and the first time with that particular warmth. I thanked him for coming and asked if he knew what the occasion was. He gave me a careful smile that revealed nothing and said, "I believe Della is going to tell the family together." He let go of my hand and stepped back. Garrett caught my eye from across the room and made a small gesture that meant, "Do not worry, you will see." He had been the one who called me last week to ask, almost too casually, whether I had any plans for Saturday night, and whether I would mind if he sent me a copy of a photograph he had been looking at from the family album. I had said sure, and he had sent me a single picture in a sealed envelope instead of through text. The envelope was still on our kitchen counter. I had not opened it yet because Garrett had asked me not until dinner. Loretta came around with a tray of small appetizers and offered me the first one without comment. She had stopped smiling, the smile she had opened the door with. The laughter she had joined in the foyer had softened into the careful quiet she always wore when she was around Della. I had been noticing this for years, that Loretta's sharp public humor evaporated entirely in Della's presence. Whatever Loretta was in our kitchen at Thanksgiving, she was a different woman in this sunroom, and the difference made me uneasy. Hank was pouring drinks at the sideboard, and when he poured mine, he slid the glass across without looking at me, the way a bartender pours for a stranger. I picked it up and set it back down. I had not had anything that day except coffee and a banana, and I thought maybe I should not start now. At 6:45, a small sound came from the hallway, and the room went quiet in the way an audience goes quiet when the curtain is about to rise. Della came in leaning on the arm of Annie Voss, walking slowly, a navy cardigan over her shoulders and a single strand of pearls around her throat that I had never seen before in my life. Her hair had been freshly set, and her glasses were the new black frames she had told me about in March. The room stood. Every single person in the sunroom stood up when Della entered. I had not known that was something this family did. I had not known there were rules in this sunroom that I did not know about. I stood with everyone else and held the back of my chair. Della took her seat at the center of the table and let out a long breath that was half laugh and half sigh, and she said, "Goodness, look at all of you. Sit down before I have a heart attack from the fuss." Everyone sat. Loretta brought Della a small glass of water with a sprig of mint. Hank moved his chair 2 inches closer to hers, the way a man does when he is trying to look supportive. Tessa sat down at the corner and put her phone face down. Garrett finally looked at me, and his eyes were damp. I did not know why, and I was not about to ask anyone. Della looked around the table slowly, the way she always did when she wanted to read the room before she started speaking, and when her eyes reached mine, she gave me a small nod that I had no way to read. It was not the nod of greeting. It was the nod of confirmation, the nod of a person ready to begin something they had been waiting weeks to begin. "Ladies," she said, "gentlemen, I have asked you all here tonight because I want to do something I have been putting off, and I have run out of time to put it off." There was a pause in the room, the pause of a family that had been called together for a reason after all. Loretta looked at Hank. Hank looked at the lawyer. The lawyer opened the leather folio on the table and did not look up. Della continued, "I have done a number of things in my life that I am not particularly proud of, and a number of things that I am. Tonight, I want to do the second kind of thing in front of the people I trust most, and I want to begin with the person I trust most of all. Marin, would you read for me?" The room turned to me. I had never in my life been handed a piece of paper at a Caldwell dinner and asked to read. I had always been the one passing the rolls, fetching the ice, excusing myself to be useful in the kitchen. Marvin Albright slid a single sheet of paper across the linen to me. It had Della's letterhead at the top, but the body of the letter was in my own grandmother's handwriting, the cursive I would have recognized anywhere in the dark. The letter was dated March of this year, and it was from my grandmother Eleanor Wicker of Hendersonville, who had been Della's oldest and most private friend. "Marin," Della said my name across the table, and I looked up. "Your grandmother Eleanor and I were friends long before you or Derek were born. Did you know that?" I said no, I did not, because I did not. "Well, we were," Della said. "We corresponded by mail for 41 years. We met twice. We had planned to live together in this house after my husband died, but she passed first, and I have never quite recovered from it, and I have never told anyone in this family because there was no one in this family I wanted to tell." She let that sentence settle into the room. No one moved. The lawyer kept his eyes on the folio. Hank reached for his wife's hand. Loretta did not take it. "Read what your grandmother wrote to me in March," Della said, "and then I am going to ask you to stay afterwards, and I am going to ask the rest of the family to give us the room." I unfolded the letter. I had not known my grandmother's handwriting could still make my hands tremble. I had assumed I was past that. The letter was 3 paragraphs long, and I read it slowly because that is how my grandmother wrote, slowly, with care, with the deliberate weight of someone choosing every word for the last time. The letter said, "Della, by the time you read this, I will be gone 2 years. I asked my lawyer to send this to you in March because that is when I want you to remember me. I want you to remember me in spring, before anyone else has had a chance to forget me. I want you to give my granddaughter Marin, who is your grandson's wife, the things I left you in trust. I want you to tell her at a dinner with everyone watching. I want you to tell her that I planned it. I want you to tell her that she is the only reason I ever came to believe that the family I gave up had a chance to be mended. Give Marin my pearls, the ones I wore at the wedding, and give her the letters. The letters are for her to read alone." I read the letter once, and then I read it again because Della had asked me to speak it, not to read it silently, and I wanted her to hear her friend's voice the way I was hearing it. I finished and set the letter down and looked at Della. Della was looking at me with the steady, kind gaze she always used when she was telling me the truth. "Your grandmother Eleanor left me a number of things when she died," Della said. "The pearls I am wearing are one of those things. The letters she wrote to me over 41 years are another. The letters she wrote to you in the years before she died, sitting at her kitchen table in Hendersonville, are another. Those letters are upstairs in the cedar chest in my bedroom. They are addressed to you, and only to you, and I have not read them, and no one in this family has read them, and I am giving them to you tonight because your grandmother asked me to, in writing, in the spring of 2018. Loretta set her glass down. Hank's shoulders tightened. Tessa's husband Reginald looked at the floor. The lawyer's pen moved silently across the folio. Derek, you are going to inherit the house. The house we are sitting in. The house your grandfather built. It was your grandmother's wish, and it is mine. Garrett, you are going to inherit the lake property, and you will hold it in trust for your father for the remainder of his life. Tessa, you will inherit the Charleston condominium and a portion of the funds from the management trust. I have written letters to each of you, and Marvin will walk you through the details after dinner in the study, if you wish. She paused and looked around the room and said, but before Marvin takes you through any details, I want to ask the family to do something for me that I have never asked any of you to do. I want you to thank Marin. The room went very quiet. The clock on the wall ticked. Hank turned his glass in his hand. Tessa looked at her mother. Garrett looked at me. I want you to thank Marin because she is the only person in this family who has bothered to know me as a person in the last 15 years, Della said. I want you to thank her because she visited me when I was sick and she did not bring casseroles and she did not bring flowers. She brought herself and she sat with me and she listened to my stories and she never once tried to fix me. I want you to thank her because she is the only one who ever noticed when I was tired, and she is the only one who ever helped me up the stairs without making me feel like a patient, Loretta said. Mother and Della held up her hand. I am not finished, Loretta. I am not finished. Marin came into this family 6 years ago, and not one of you made her feel at home. I have watched it, and I have been quiet about it, and tonight I am not going to be quiet about it. She is married to my grandson. She is the granddaughter I never had, and the family I lost 40 years ago when I stopped writing to my sister came back to me through her, and I want you to know that before I go. Hank cleared his throat. He said, Mother, we all love Marin. We are just not the kind of family that makes a fuss. Della said. I know. That is why tonight I am the kind of family that does. Della turned back to me. She reached into the small bag by her chair and took out a velvet box the size of a deck of cards. She opened it. Inside, laid against it a pale silk lining, were the pearls she was wearing around her neck, except they were not. Inside were a different pair of pearls, 2 strands, graduated, the kind my grandmother had worn at my parents' wedding in the photograph on the mantel in our apartment. These are for you, Della said. I wore them once, when your grandmother asked me to, when my husband died, and your grandmother Eleanor came to the funeral and put them around my neck because hers were too short to give comfort. She took them off and gave them to me, and I have worn them every day since. Tonight I am giving them to you because she asked me to and because you have earned them. She closed the box and pushed it across the table to my place setting. The little typed place card with my name on it was now sitting on top of a velvet box of pearls. I did not trust myself to speak. I nodded and put my hand on the box and closed my eyes for a second. Now, family, Della said, I am going to say one more thing, and then I am going to ask Marin to stay with me in this room for a few minutes, and I am going to ask Marvin and his partner to read the rest of the will out loud for the rest of you in the study. Loretta said, Mother, you cannot mean to read the will tonight. Tonight is supposed to be a private dinner. This is a private dinner, Loretta. It is a private dinner at which I am doing private business. If you prefer not to know tonight what I have decided, you are welcome to wait in the kitchen. Loretta stood up. Hank's hand went to her arm. Loretta shook him off. She said, Mother, we have come to your home. We have driven from the city. We have eaten the food. We have done all of this. And you are going to do this now, tonight, when some of us have not even had a chance to talk to you. Yes, Della said. Tonight. Because tomorrow I might not be able to. Because next week I might not be able to. And because Marin is here and the moment is here and I am not going to waste the moment. Hank said. Mother, please. Hank, Della said, be quiet. I am 83. I have run out of patience for what is polite. The lawyer's pen had stopped moving. The room held its breath. I am going to ask Marin to stay and to come upstairs with me, Della said, and I am going to give her the letters that her grandmother wrote to her And I am going to ask her to forgive this family for what it has not done for her, and to take what I am giving her with the love with which it is being given, and to consider whether she would be willing to put her name on the deed of this house next to Derek's, as my grandmother asked me to ask her, because I have decided that if Derek inherits this house, then Marin inherits the right to make decisions in it. Loretta sat back down. She did not speak. Hank did not speak. The clock ticked. I looked at Derek. Derek, who had been silent the entire evening and who had not raised his voice in his parents' house since he was 16, said, "Grandmother, I want to thank you, and I want to apologize to Marin, and the apology should have come 6 years ago. It is not the kind of thing that can come from a place card. I have known for a long time that my family has not welcomed her the way she deserved to be welcomed. I have been quiet about it. I am not going to be quiet about it any longer." He turned to me. He said, "I brought nothing tonight because Della asked me not to. I want you to know that. I left the house empty-handed because Della told me last week on the phone that the only thing she wanted from us tonight was us. I had not known that. He had not told me. He had asked me 3 times if I was going to bring something so that the question would seem ordinary on the drive, and I had answered him the way I usually do, not knowing that he was giving me a script to follow that the family at the table was supposed to read as the same old Marin who never quite gets it right. He said, "I think my grandmother may have been the only person in this family who has ever seen you clearly. And I want you to know that if she has given you a place card tonight, then the place is yours." Della stood up slowly the way she always did with the help of Annie Voss. She said, "Marin, will you come with me?" I stood up. I left my chair. I followed her out of the sunroom and up the staircase and down the wide hall to her bedroom, where the cedar chest sat at the foot of her bed. The chest was not locked. Della sat down on the edge of the bed and watched me open it. Inside the chest, there were a number of things. There were 3 photograph albums I had never seen. There was a small mahogany box with a brass clasp. There was a soft leather satchel with a strap, the kind my grandmother Eleanor had carried to the post office every Saturday morning in Hendersonville. And there was a stack of letters, 58 of them, each one tied with a thin red ribbon addressed to me in my grandmother's handwriting, with my full married name on the front, Marin Caldwell, as if my grandmother had known all along what was coming. Della said, "I am going to leave you alone with these for a few minutes. I am going to walk back down and let Marvin read the will to the family. They are going to be upset. Some of them are going to say unkind things. I want you to know that those things are about them, not about you and not about me. When you are ready, you can come down. You can come down whenever you want. You do not have to come down tonight. You do not have to come down tomorrow. You do not have to come back to this house at all if you do not want to." I did not know what to say. I said, "Thank you." She said, "Don't thank me. Your grandmother did this. I am only the messenger." She stood and Annie helped her out of the room. The door was not closed. I sat down on the floor by the cedar chest and untied the first ribbon. The envelope was good paper, thick, the kind my grandmother had always used for important correspondence. Her handwriting was careful and slow. The first letter was dated 2017, 2 months after her diagnosis. The last letter was dated December of 2018, 6 months after her funeral, written by my mother on her behalf, with a small note at the bottom in my grandmother's actual hand written in the last month of her life. "Marin, read these when you are ready. Della will know when you are ready, but I will be gone, so she will know for me." I read the first letter. It was 8 pages long. My grandmother wrote about her life, about Della, about the house, about the family she had walked away from when she was 23, about the sister she had stopped writing to, about the brother-in-law who had taken her in after her husband died, and about how, when I married into the Caldwell family, she had felt the odd, improbable sense that the family she had walked away from had come back to her in a different shape. She wrote, "Marin, you are the only grandchild I have who married for love. I know that sounds strange from a woman my age. I know love is supposed to be ordinary. It is not ordinary in our family, and I have been waiting 70 years for it to come back." I read the second letter and the third, and then I stopped because my hands were shaking too much to turn the pages. The clock in the hallway ticked. The house was quiet downstairs. After a while, I went down. The sunroom had been cleared, and the folding table had been folded up against the wall. The family was in the kitchen, standing around the wide farm table where Della usually sat, holding coffee cups the way people hold coffee cups when something has happened that they do not want to discuss. Loretta was crying quietly into a paper towel. Hank was standing beside her with his hand finally on her shoulder. Garrett had put his arm around his cousin Tessa. Reginald had his hands in his pockets. The lawyer was packing his folio against the leather case. Della was there. She was sitting in her usual chair at the head of the farm table. She was holding my grandmother's pearls in her lap, the ones she had given to me earlier, the ones she had been wearing for the last 7 years, the ones she had just taken off. She had made the box I had given her come back to her, and she was holding the pearls the way a person holds something when they are about to give it away again, to a different person for a different reason. I said, "Grandmother, what is going on?" She looked up at me. She said, "Marin, please sit down." I sat down across from her. The family made space for me, although no one said anything. Della said, "I made a mistake. I gave you the wrong pearls. The pearls I gave you upstairs are the ones your grandmother Eleanor gave to me when I was grieving. The pearls I am holding are the ones my mother gave to me when I was married, and I want you to have these instead. I am sorry. I should not have swapped them in front of the family. I should have given you the right ones first." She pushed the box across to me again, and this time inside was a different pair of pearls, a single strand with a small diamond clasp, the kind her own mother had worn in the photographs in the hallway. "I also want to tell you, in front of this family, the reason I asked you to come early," Della said. "I did not ask you to come early so that you could carry a covered dish. I did not ask you to come early so that you could be introduced. I asked you to come early because I have spent 6 years watching this family treat you like a guest in a house you have earned the right to live in, and I wanted to give you 20 minutes in this house in which you were not a guest. I wanted you to sit in the chair at the head of the sunroom table and to read the letter your grandmother wrote to me, and to receive what I am giving you in front of the people who have been slow to give it to you on purpose. I wanted you to know that you were not invited to decorate the room or to set the table. You were invited to be the reason the room was set." She looked around the table at her family and said, "I want you all to know that when Marin agreed to marry Derek, I went to the family lawyer and added her name to the deed of this house next to Derek's, before they were even engaged. I went to the lawyer 2 weeks after I met her. I have spent the last 6 years waiting for this family to understand what I understood that night, which is that Marin Caldwell is a member of this family, whether or not any of you decided she was, and that if any of you could not agree with that, then the house was forfeit." The room held its breath. Hank said, "Mother, you cannot give the house to Derek and Marin and take it away from the rest of us." "Hank," Della said, "I am not taking the house away from any of you. I am leaving the house where it has always been, in the right hands. The hands of the person I trust most to maintain it, the hands of the person who has spent 6 years waking up early on Saturdays to come sit with an old woman and to listen to her talk about her sister. The rest of you are welcome to come to this house whenever you like and as long as you like. You will not have the deed. You will not be able to make decisions about the property. Marin and Derek will make those decisions, and they will do it well, because they are the kind of people who do things well." Loretta said, "Mother, are you punishing us?" "Yes," Della said. "I am punishing you. I have been punishing you for years. I have done it with politeness, and now I am doing it with honesty about the pearls. The reason I am punishing you is because the woman sleeping in your son's guest room is not your guest. She is your family. The reason I am punishing you is because she has been your family for 6 years, and you have not once treated her like one. The reason I am punishing you is because if you do not like how I feel about her, then you should have been nicer to her. It is not complicated." Hank stood up. Hank was 6 feet, 2.5 inches tall, and he had the kind of build that men of his generation kept into their 60s, and he stood up the way a man stands up when he is about to leave. He said, "Mother, I am not going to sit here and be criticized in my own family home." "This is not your family home," Della said. "This is my family home. You grew up in it. You do not own it." Hank sat back down. The room went very quiet. Loretta put her head in her hands. Garrett, who had been quiet the entire evening, said, Grandmother, I agree with you, and I want you to know that Marin has been welcome at this house by me and by my wife ever since my wedding, when I told Derek that I was glad he had found her and that I was glad she was coming to the family. Marin has been one of the best things that has happened to our generation, and I have been embarrassed by how this family has treated her, and I am sorry. I had not expected Garrett to say that. Garrett had always been the steady one at family gatherings, the one who passed the potatoes and stayed out of the conversation. He had been quiet. He was not quiet now. After the lawyer had finished settling the family in the study, after Reginald had made the long drive back to Charleston with Tessa in the passenger seat, and the volume of her voice lower than I had ever heard it, after Hank had shaken Della's hand at the door with the kind of careful, formal politeness that nobody in this family used with anybody, after Loretta had walked me out to the porch and said, Marin, I am sorry. I am sorry for years of not saying this. Please forgive me. Please come for breakfast next Saturday. After Derek had stood in the driveway and kissed me with the kind of kiss he used to give me in the early years, before the family taught him to be careful, after Della had given me a second box from her bedroom, this one wrapped in brown paper and tied with the same thin red ribbon my grandmother had used on her letters, after Garrett had put his hand on my shoulder and said, You did not know what was coming, and you did not need to, after all of that, Derek and I drove home in the dark. The drive took 40 minutes. We did not speak the entire way. When we got home, I left my shoes by the door, walked into the kitchen, and opened the second box. Inside was a single object, a small mahogany box with a brass clasp, the same one I had seen in the cedar chest. Inside that box was the original will of Della's great-grandmother, dated 1908, written in fountain pen on parchment too thick to fold, and a folded note in Della's handwriting dated last week. The note said, Marin, this house has been in this family for 117 years. Your grandmother Eleanor helped me hold it together for the years I might have lost it. I am passing it to you. I am asking you to do for your children what she did for me. Do not let this family give it away. Do not let this family sell the crepe myrtles. Do not let this family break the small fountain in the garden that your grandfather built with his own hands. Marry well, raise well, and let the house do its work. I read the note 3 times. I folded it up. I put it back in the box. Derek came into the kitchen and put his arms around me from behind. He said, Are you okay? I said, Yes, I think so. I think I am finally okay. He did not ask any more questions. He finished his coffee. We went to bed. 2 days later, I drove back to Della's house alone. Della was sitting in her usual chair at the farm table. We had tea. I told her I had read my grandmother's letters. I told her I had cried for 2 hours. She nodded. She said, That is about right. Your grandmother cried when she read mine. We were a pair of criers. She asked me if I would agree to be on the deed of the house. I said yes. She asked me if I would agree to read the family Bible out loud to anyone in the family who wanted to hear it. I said yes. She asked me if I would plant a row of hydrangeas by the back fence for my grandmother. I said yes. She told me about a 5th cousin in Saluda who had been asking about the property for years. I said no. She laughed. She said, Good, that is the right answer. She told me about Hank. I said nothing. She told me she had forgiven him already. She told me Loretta had written her a letter that morning in pencil on a legal pad and that she had read it 3 times. She told me that Garrett was going to be at the next family dinner and that he had asked if he could bring his new girlfriend and that she had said yes without asking the girlfriend's name. She said, I am learning. I am 83 and I am still learning. I drove home. The crepe myrtles along the gravel lane were closing up for the evening. I thought about my grandmother Eleanor. I thought about Della. I thought about how the laughter in the foyer had not been about what I was carrying. It had been about what they had been assuming about me, and what they had been assuming had been wrong, and they did not know it yet. Now they did. I parked the car in our driveway behind our little Camry. I turned it off. I sat for a moment in the front seat. Then I went inside. Story 2. My brother told me Dad had left him everything. Then the lawyer asked us both to sit down. I never thought I'd be standing in a lawyer's office, smelling stale coffee and anxiety, while my older brother Derek scrolled through his phone like he was waiting for a bus. 2 weeks since Dad passed. 2 weeks of Derek being unusually helpful with the funeral arrangements, unusually patient with Mom's crying, and unusually interested in the will. Relax, Chloe, he said without looking up. It's just formalities. Dad and I talked. He knew what I was going through with the business, what he was going through. His third startup in 5 years. The one that was hemorrhaging money faster than I could pay my own rent as a high school history teacher, but I bit my tongue. That's what I always did. The lawyer, Mr. Patterson, a man with kind eyes and a folder that felt like a bomb, finally gestured for us to sit. Derek immediately leaned forward, his elbow on the polished mahogany table. So, Derek said, a smile tugging at his lips, when do I get the keys? Patterson cleared his throat. Before we proceed, I need to confirm something with both of you. He opened the folder, but his eyes stayed on me. Chloe, your father left you a letter, handwritten. He asked that you read it privately. I blinked. A letter? My father had never been a man of words. He showed love by fixing my car, by showing up to my choir concerts with a quiet nod, by leaving money in my coat pocket when I was struggling. I took the envelope with shaking hands. Derek scoffed. Okay, great. Can we get to the part where I don't lose my house? Patterson didn't flinch. Actually, Derek, your father made a very specific request. He asked that I read the will aloud only after Chloe has read her letter. He insisted you both be present. I could feel Derek's glare burn into the side of my face. I opened the envelope carefully, the paper smelling faintly of Dad's workshop, motor oil and sawdust. The handwriting was shaky, like his hands had been tired. Chloe, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I wasn't better at saying this out loud. You were always the one who stayed. When Mom was sick, you came home every weekend. When Derek needed money, you loaned it even though you had nothing. I saw you. But I also saw him. I saw what he's been doing. The business isn't failing by accident. And the house, our house, isn't what you think. There are things I couldn't tell you while I was alive. I was too ashamed. I was too scared of breaking the family. This letter is my apology and my warning. I felt my stomach drop as Derek snatched the letter from my hand before I could finish. He scanned it, his face going pale, then read, "What the hell is this?" he snapped. Dad was confused. He was on medication. This doesn't mean anything. Patterson adjusted his glasses. I'm afraid it does. Your father's mental state was evaluated by 2 independent doctors 3 weeks before his passing. He was of sound mind. Derek laughed. A sharp, hollow sound. This is ridiculous. Dad told me everything. The house, the land, the life insurance. I was the one who called him every day. I was the one who visited. She was too busy with her little students and her meaningful life. I felt the old familiar ache in my chest, the one that said, he's your brother. Forgive him. He's hurting. But then Patterson said something that made my blood run cold. Derek, your father didn't leave you the house. In fact, the house was sold 6 months ago. Your father liquidated nearly all his assets. The only thing remaining is a safety deposit box, and I'm required to open it in front of both of you, with a witness. Derek's face went slack. Sold? That's not possible. I have the deeds. I have. Patterson cut him off, his voice flat. The deeds you have are forgeries. We have video evidence of you attempting to transfer the property into your name while your father was in the hospital. He knew. He let you believe you had succeeded so you wouldn't try anything more drastic. The air left the room. Derek's eyes darted to me, desperate, furious, and something else, and afraid. Chloe, he whispered, reaching for my hand. You don't understand. I was trying to protect the family. There's something you don't know. About the money. About what Dad was really doing. I pulled my hand back, the letter crumpling in my fist. What are you talking about? He opened his mouth, but Patterson raised a hand. Perhaps it's best if we open the safety deposit box first. Your father specifically said that's where the truth is. I looked at my brother, this man I'd defended my entire life, this man who called me only when he needed something, this man who stood in front of me with a mask I was suddenly seeing cracks in. For the first time in 34 years, I didn't want to hear what Derek had to say. But the box was waiting, and so was the truth that would break everything we thought we knew. Update 1. The safety deposit box was smaller than I expected, a dull metal rectangle that Patterson carried from the vault like it weighed nothing. But when he set it on the table between us, I swear I heard my own heartbeat echo off the walls. Derek was sweating now. I could see the dampness at his collar, the way his knee bounced under the table. He kept checking his phone, then shoving it back in his pocket. He was waiting for something. Or someone. Patterson produced a key from an envelope, Dad's handwriting on the front, for Chloe and Derek together. He inserted it, turned it, and the lock clicked with a sound that felt final. Inside was a mess. Not the neat stacks of papers I expected, but photographs, receipts, a small notebook, and a USB drive. Patterson carefully lifted each item, placing them on the table. My eyes landed on the photos first, pictures of a woman I didn't recognize. She was young, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair and a smile that seemed familiar in a way that made my skin crawl. "What is this?" I asked, picking up one of the photos. "Who is she?" Derek snatched it from my hand, his face going pale. "It's nothing. Dad had friends. You know how he was." He had one friend, Derek. Bill from the hardware store. He never had her. Not once. I went through his phone when he was sick. I never saw this woman. Patterson cleared his throat. "There's a letter in here addressed to you both. Your father wrote it about a week before he passed." He slid it across the table. This one was typed, formal, like Dad knew he needed to be precise. I read it aloud, my voice shaking halfway through. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm sorry I didn't tell you this sooner. The woman in the photographs is your half-sister. Her name is Maya. I met her mother before I met your mother. It was a mistake I carried for 30 years, and I tried to do right by her, quietly, secretly. But she got sick a few years ago, and I needed money to help her. Money I didn't have, so I did something I'm not proud of." I stopped, my eyes blurred. Derek was shaking his head, muttering, "No. No, no, no. This can't be happening." I kept reading. "Derek, you asked me for money a lot. I gave you what I could, but most of it wasn't from savings. I borrowed. I used the house as collateral for loans I couldn't pay back. That's why I sold it. Not to punish you, but to stop us from losing everything to the banks. Maya's medical bills were crippling, and the debts I took on to keep the family afloat, they didn't go away when she passed." I felt the room tilt. "Debs? What debts?" Derek lunged for the notebook, flipping through it wildly. "He was gambling," he whispered. "Oh my God, Dad was gambling. There's a ledger here. It's not just loans. He was playing the stock market, crypto, even underground poker. He was trying to win enough to fix everything. He lost it all." I grabbed the notebook and saw the numbers for myself. Thousands, tens of thousands. All funneled through accounts I didn't recognize, with notes scribbled in Dad's messy handwriting. Bad week, need to recover, Derek's rent, Maya's surgery. I looked at my brother. "You knew about Maya, didn't you?" He didn't answer. "You said you talked to Dad every day. You said you were the one who visited. You let me believe I was the absent one when I was just trying to survive on a teacher's salary while you—" My voice cracked. "What did you do, Derek?" His jaw tightened. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "He called me the night before he died. He told me about the debts. He told me he was scared. And then he asked me for help. One last time, I told him I couldn't. I told him I'd lost too much already." Patterson spoke softly. "Derek, I have a copy of that call. Your father recorded it. He said he was terrified you would do something drastic." Derek laughed again, but this time there was no humor in it. "He recorded me? He set a trap for me? I was trying to protect myself. He was dragging us all down with him. The business wasn't failing because of me. It was failing because I kept bailing him out. I couldn't take another hit." The USB drive sat untouched on the table. Patterson pointed to it. "That contains the full financial records. Your father wanted you to have them. He wanted you to know that even though he made terrible choices, he was trying to shield you from the worst of it." I stared at Derek. The mask was gone now. Underneath was a man so scared of losing control that he had let his own father drown. "What else aren't you telling me?" I asked quietly. Derek's eyes flickered. "There's something on that drive. Something I wasn't supposed to see. I copied it when I had a chance. I thought I could stop it." He pulled out his phone again, shaking. "There's a second will. Dad made a second will 2 months ago, and he put all the debt in my name. He left me nothing but liability. He knew I'd destroy the first will if I found out, so he made a backup and gave it to someone I couldn't reach." "Who?" Derek looked at the door. "That's why I've been checking my phone. I told her everything. I thought if I could get to her before this meeting, I could." The door opened. A woman in a dark suit walked in, carrying a leather folder. Her eyes found Derek, and she smiled with cold precision. "Good afternoon, Mr. Ashton. I'm Maya's attorney. Your father gave me a sealed copy of the second will. He asked that I deliver it personally, and I'm here to make sure every single detail is honored." Derek sank back in his chair. And I knew this wasn't an ending. It was only the beginning of the reckoning. Update 2. The woman introduced herself as Elena Vasquez, and she didn't waste time with pleasantries. She sat down across from us, opened her folder, and slid a document across the table that looked exactly like the will Patterson had just read, except this one had a different date, different signatures, and a clause that made my stomach drop. "Your father came to me 2 months before his passing. Elena said, her voice calm and clinical. He was terrified of what Derek might do if he discovered the extent of the financial damage. He also knew Derek had already forged documents to transfer the house, so he made a decision. Derek was trembling now, his face slick with sweat. That's not legal. I was his son. I had power of attorney when he was sick. He wasn't in his right mind when he signed that. Elena raised an eyebrow. He was evaluated by a psychiatrist the day before he signed. I have the report. He was lucid, aware, and fully competent. He also had me record the entire meeting. She pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. A familiar voice filled the room. Dad's voice, raspy but clear. I'm signing this of my own free will. Derek has been stealing from me for years. I have proof. I'm not doing this to punish him. I'm doing this to protect Chloe. She's the only one who never took advantage of me. I felt tears burn my eyes. Dad had known. All those years I thought he was oblivious to Derek's manipulation. He had been watching, waiting, collecting evidence. Elena continued. The second will transfers all remaining assets, including the life insurance policy, to Chloe. But there's a condition. The debts must be settled first, and the debt is significant. Your father owed approximately $200,000 to various creditors. Most of that was borrowed to cover Maya's medical expenses and Derek's failed business ventures. Derek slammed his hand on the table. That's a lie. He borrowed money for himself. He was gambling. It's all in that notebook. Elena nodded slowly. Yes, he was gambling. But do you know why? He was trying to recover the money you lost when you invested his retirement savings in your startup without his permission. The same startup you told him was guaranteed to return triple. He found out 6 months ago. He didn't confront you because he was ashamed that he had trusted you and ashamed that he couldn't protect Chloe from the fallout. I looked at Derek. The pieces were clicking into place now, ugly and sharp. You took Dad's retirement money, the money he worked 40 years for? Derek's voice cracked. I was going to pay it back. The startup was supposed to work. I didn't know the market would crash. I didn't know. You didn't know anything, I snapped, anger rising like a tide I couldn't stop. You never knew anything except how to take. You took from Mom when she was sick. You took from me every time you borrowed money you never returned. And now I find out you took from Dad too. While he was dying, the room was silent except for Derek's ragged breathing. Patterson sat motionless, his hands folded on the table. Elena watched me with something like approval. There's more, Elena said quietly. The USB drive contains records of every transaction Derek made using your father's accounts. There's also a confession, written by your father, witnessed by me, that states Derek threatened him 2 days before he died. I whipped my head toward Derek. You threatened him? Derek held up his hands, eyes wide. No, I didn't threaten him. I told him I couldn't help him anymore. I told him he was on his own. He was crying, Chloe. He was begging me to fix it. And I walked away. I left him there, alone, with all those debts and all that fear. His voice broke. I didn't know he was going to die the next day. I didn't know. You didn't care, I whispered. You never cared. Elena slid another document toward me. This is the deed to a small property in Vermont. Your father bought it years ago, in your name only. He wanted you to have a place to go. A fresh start. The house is paid off. It's yours free and clear. The debt won't touch it. I stared at the deed. Dad had been planning this. He had been protecting me all along, even when I thought he didn't see me. Derek stood up abruptly, knocking his chair back. This is insane. You can't just, I have rights. I'm going to fight this. I'll hire a lawyer. You'll do nothing, Elena said, her voice cutting like a blade. Because if you fight this, I will release the recording of your conversation with your father. The one where you threatened to make his life hell if he didn't give you power of attorney. The one where you said Chloe doesn't deserve a cent. I have it, and I will play it in court. Derek froze, his face contorted, anger, fear, desperation all warring for dominance. Then, slowly, he sank back into his chair. You've destroyed me, he said hoarsely. All of you. Dad, Maya, her lawyer. You all planned this. I shook my head, tears spilling over. No, Derek, you destroyed yourself. Dad just made sure you couldn't take me down with you. Patterson finally spoke, his voice gentle. There's one more thing. The safety deposit box also contains a letter from Maya. She wrote it before she passed. She asked that it be given to you, Chloe, if anything ever happened to your father. Elena handed me a small, sealed envelope. I opened it with trembling fingers, and inside was a handwritten note, beautiful, looping handwriting that felt like a ghost. Chloe, I never met you, but I heard about you. Your father talked about you constantly. He said you had a heart like a lighthouse, steady, warm, guiding others home, even when you were drowning. I was sick for a long time, and he saved my life. But he couldn't save himself. He was too busy saving everyone else. Take the house in Vermont. Take the memories. And please, don't hate Derek. He's broken, not evil. He's lost his way. Maybe you can help him find it again. Or maybe you need to save yourself. Either way, it's okay. Your father would want you to be free. I clutched the letter to my chest, sobbing. All this time, Dad had been carrying secrets too heavy to bear, and he had left me the one thing I never expected: permission to let go. Derek was crying now too, ugly, gasping sobs that filled the room. He reached for my hand. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry, Chloe. I didn't mean for any of this. I just wanted to be someone. I wanted to be important like you. I looked at him, this broken, desperate man who had spent his whole life chasing approval and never finding it. And for a moment, I almost forgave him. But then I remembered the forgeries, the threats, the way he had let Dad die alone. I pulled my hand back. I'm going to Vermont, I said quietly, and I'm not coming back. The room was silent. Patterson finally closed his folder. Elena gave me a small nod, and Derek just sat there, staring at the table, the weight of everything crushing him. But I felt lighter. For the first time in years, I felt free. Final update. 6 months have passed since I sat in that lawyer's office, and I'm writing this from the porch of a small farmhouse in Vermont, watching the sun bleed orange over the mountains. It's quiet here, the kind of quiet that lets you hear your own thoughts for the first time. I've spent a lot of mornings like this, coffee in hand, trying to piece together who I am now. The house Dad left me is modest: 3 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, and a barn that's slowly collapsing in on itself. But it's mine. No mortgage, no debt, no Derek calling at 2 a.m. with another crisis. I quit my teaching job, packed what little I owned, and drove 12 hours without looking back. The first week, I cried every night. The second week, I started fixing things: the leaky faucet, the creaky stairs, the hole in the screen door. Physical work that made my hands ache and my mind shut up for a while. I kept in touch with Elena, Maya's attorney. She became something of a guide through the wreckage. She helped me navigate the debts, sold off Dad's remaining assets, and negotiated with creditors. It took 4 months, but we finally settled everything. Derek's name is still attached to some of the liability, but I made a choice. I paid off the portion that was truly Dad's, the part that came from his desperate attempts to save Maya. The rest? That's Derek's problem now. I'm done carrying him. Speaking of Derek, I haven't seen him since that day. He called once, about 2 weeks after I left. I let it go to voicemail. He sounded small, broken, apologizing between sobs. He said he was seeing a therapist, that he'd started going to meetings for compulsive gambling, that he wanted to make things right. I listened to the message 3 times, crying each time, and then I deleted it. I wasn't ready then. I'm not sure I'm ready now. But last week, I got a letter from him, handwritten. No return address, but I recognized the messy scrawl. I almost threw it away, but something made me open it. Chloe, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to read this. But I need to say it anyway. I was so consumed by jealousy that I couldn't see what I was doing. You were always the one Dad was proud of, and I hated you for it. I convinced myself you didn't deserve anything, that I was the one who struggled, the one who needed saving. But I was wrong. You were saving everyone, and I was just taking. I'm in recovery now. I lost the business, the house, my marriage. Megan left me, and I don't blame her. I'm living in a small apartment, working a regular job for the first time in my life. It's humbling. It's also the first time I've felt honest. Dad's death broke me, Chloe, but it also woke me up. I see now what I did. I see the weight I put on you, and I'm so, so sorry. I'm not asking you to come back. I'm not asking for money or help. I just want you to know that I'm trying. I'm trying to be the brother you deserved all along. Maybe one day, when we're both ready, we can try again. But if not, I understand. I'll love you either way. Your brother Derek, I read that letter a dozen times. I cried. I raged. I almost called him. But then I walked into the barn and found the box of Dad's things I'd been avoiding. His old tools, his work gloves, the photographs he never showed anyone. Buried at the bottom was a small leather journal I hadn't noticed before. It was Dad's private journal. The last entry was dated 3 days before he died. I've made so many mistakes. I lied to protect them, and I hurt them instead. But I see it now. The only way to save Chloe is to let her go. She spent her whole life fixing everyone else. I want her to finally fix herself. I want her to be free. And Derek, I hope he finds his way. I hope he sees that he was always loved, even when he didn't deserve it. That's the hard part of being a parent, loving them both, even when one is breaking your heart. I closed the journal and held it to my chest. Dad had been trying to protect both of us in his own broken, complicated way. He wasn't perfect. He gambled, he lied, he kept secrets, but he also loved us. He loved us so much that he sacrificed everything to try and keep us from drowning. That's when I made my decision. I called Derek last night. He answered on the first ring, his voice trembling when he heard mine. Chloe? Hey, Derek, I said, and my voice was steadier than I expected. I got your letter. Silence. Then a choked sob. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I know, I said. I know you are. We talked for 2 hours. He told me about his therapy, his job, his small victories. I told him about Vermont, the house, the barn I'm slowly rebuilding. We didn't talk about Dad's will or the debts or the lies. We just talked like we used to when we were kids and the world was simple. I'm not ready to forgive him completely. I don't know if I ever will be. But I realized something. Forgiveness isn't for him. It's for me. It's the final weight I need to set down. So I invited him to visit. Not tomorrow, not next month, but someday. When we're both ready, he said yes. Today, I'm going to the hardware store to buy paint. The barn is going to be blue, Dad's favorite color. And tomorrow, I'm going to plant a garden in the backyard, just like Mom used to have. Life isn't neat. It doesn't tie up in a bow. There's still grief, still anger, still 100 questions I'll never have answers to. But for the first time in my life, I'm not trying to fix everything. I'm just living. Dad gave me freedom. Derek gave me the truth. And I gave myself permission to finally let go. The sun is fully up now, painting the mountains in gold. I take a sip of my coffee, and for a moment, I swear I can feel Dad's hand on my shoulder, steady, warm, telling me it's okay. It's okay. I'm okay. Story 3. My husband, said I, was embarrassing the family. Then his mother whispered something in my ear. It started at a retirement party, which sounds like the most boring possible place for your life to split open, but that is exactly what happened to me in June on the back deck of my in-laws' lake house. My husband, Nathan's father, Rich, was retiring after 38 years at the same insurance firm, and Carol, my mother-in-law, had gone all out, string lights along the railing, a rented tent, a cake shaped like a briefcase. The whole production. Nathan had been talking about this party for a month, the way he talked about everything, which was mostly about how other people would see it. He wanted me in a specific dress, heels on grass, hair a certain way, and when I laughed and said nobody would notice if I wore jeans, he got that tight look around his mouth and said, my mother-in-law's friends notice everything. I should have heard it then. The little warning bell, but I was used to Nathan's moods and I told myself he just cared. That was all it was. A man who cared about how things looked because he wanted everything to be nice for everyone. So I wore the dress. We got there at 11 in the morning, and the lake was doing that thing where it goes silver and flat in the sun. And Carol came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel, and hugged me like I was her own daughter. And I remember thinking how lucky I was to have a mother-in-law who actually liked me. Aunt Phyllis was already at the folding table shelling peas, and Danny was chasing his kids around the lawn. And it was all so easy and loud and normal that I let myself relax. Becca, Nathan's sister, was there with her husband Todd, and she grabbed me the second I stepped foot on the grass and made me do a shot of something sweet out of a plastic cup. And we stood there laughing about nothing while our husbands did whatever husbands do by the grill. I loved Becca. She was the reason I never felt like an outsider in that family. And I thought I was the reason she felt safe telling the stories she told. And the whole afternoon had that golden quality where you think, this is what I signed up for. This is the family I married into. Nathan loosened up too once his father's business partners arrived, because then he was on, the great host, pouring drinks, laughing too loud at Richard's jokes, and I watched him relax into it, and I was glad we ate at 2, a long table under the tent, and Carol's potato salad made the way her grandmother made it. And Todd burned the burgers the way he burned everything, and there was so much food and noise and sunscreen that I remember thinking I would remember this day forever, which is funny because I did, but not for the reason I meant. Then the story happened. Becca asked how Nathan and I met because somebody's girlfriend at the other end of the table had just said they met their boyfriend at a grocery store. And Becca said, "Oh God, did you hear how these two met?" And Nathan went very still beside me. And I did not notice. I just launched into it. I told them about the karaoke bar downtown, the one with the sticky floor that smelled like old beer and pledge, and how my friend Marcus dragged me there for his birthday, and how some man I had never seen got up on that stage and butchered a country song so badly that the whole bar was laughing with tears in their eyes. And I told them how I looked at him just to see the train wreck. And it was Nathan, and he was so bad and so brave about it that something in me went soft. And so when he finished and the crowd was still clapping, I got up there and sang the second verse with him, badly on purpose, so he would not be alone in it. And I told him how he found me afterward by the bar and said, "You ruined my song." And I said, "You ruined it first." And how he laughed, really laughed, with his whole face, and asked if he could buy me a drink. And I said, "Yes, on one condition, you never sing in public again." And he says, "Deal." The table roared. Carol laughed so hard she had to set down her fork, and Phyllis was slapping the table. And Todd said, "That's your brother-in-law, folks, a national treasure." And Rich was grinning and said the boy always did have more heart than sense, and it was perfect. It was one of those moments where a story brings everyone closer. I looked at Nathan, expecting him to be laughing too, and he was not laughing. His face had gone flat, the way it goes when he is angry, and I mean the specific flat, the one where his eyes get still and his jaw does that little thing, and I only recognized it because I had seen it once before, at a dinner with his old college friends when somebody called him by a nickname he hated, and he had been quiet for hours afterward. He reached under the table and squeezed my knee hard, and he said, low, right into my ear, "You sure told them everything, didn't you?" I laughed and said it was a good story, and he did not say anything. And about 20 minutes later, when people were starting to drift toward the card table and the lawn games, he took my arm with that fake bright grip and steered me into the kitchen, past Carol, who was loading the dishwasher, and shut the door behind us. He said, "What the hell was that I said? What was what?" He said, "The story, Claire, the karaoke story. You just stood there in front of my father's business partners and told my entire family I made a fool of myself in a bar, and you dressed it up like it was cute, like I was the punchline, because that is what you think I am, a punchline." I said, "It wasn't like that at all. Everyone loved it. Your dad was laughing." He said, "My dad was embarrassed. My mother was embarrassed. You embarrass this family. You do this every time. You get comfortable and you forget who you are, and you start performing, and people are polite about it, but I'm the one who has to stand there and feel it. I'm the one who has to look at my father's partner and know he's thinking about how I married a woman who tells the whole room my business." I stood there with my mouth open, and I think I said something like, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that." And he said, "You never mean it. That's the problem. You don't think before you open your mouth." And he said, "You should go apologize to my mother for making her party about you." I said, "Apologize for telling a story everyone laughed at." And he looked at me with so much contempt that I actually took a step back, and he said, "Fix it." And then he walked out and left me standing in his mother's kitchen. I stood there a long time. I could hear the party through the window, the clink of glasses, Todd yelling about cornhole, somebody's kid shrieking with joy, and I felt like I was on the wrong side of glass, like I was watching my own life through a window I couldn't open. I did not cry in the kitchen because someone could walk in, which is a special kind of misery, holding it in until your throat aches because you do not want to explain to a house full of nice people why your husband just told you that you embarrass him. So I went into the pantry, the little one off the kitchen where Carol keeps the bulk spices and the extra paper towels, and I shut the door and leaned against the shelf and let myself cry into a dish towel, quick and ugly. And that is where Carol found me. I did not hear her come in. She is slight and quiet, and she moves like a cat, and suddenly the door was open a few inches, and there was a sliver of light in her face, And she said, "Oh, honey," I said I was just getting air. And she looked at the dish towel in my hands, and she did not believe me. She closed the door behind her and stood in the dim with me, in the smell of paprika and vanilla, and she said, "He said something to you, didn't he?" I tried to say it was nothing, and she said, "Sweetheart, I have been married to that man's father for 43 years. I have been his mother for 35. I know every word he owns." And then she said, "Let me tell you what he said." And she said it back to me almost word for word. "You embarrass the family. You always do this. You don't think before you open your mouth. Fix it." And I felt the blood leave my face because she had nailed it. Every last sentence I said, "How did you know?" And she looked at me for a long moment, and then she stepped closer and she whispered in my ear. She whispered, "Because he said the exact same words to the woman before you, at this exact house, at this exact table, 6 years ago. I was standing on the other side of this door, and I counted every one of them. Her name was Allie Hale. She had a laugh like a bell, and she sat where you sat tonight and told the story about how they met, and he did the same thing, pulled her in here while I was at this sink, and said every word he just said to you. And she cried in this pantry for an hour, and I told her she was being dramatic because I loved my son and I did not want to believe it. And she was gone by August, and he told everyone she cheated on him with a coworker, and I have never believed a word of it. I have thought about her face every single day since, and I told myself if I ever saw another woman in this house with that laugh, I would say something. So I am saying something. You have a lovely laugh, sweetheart. Do not let him train it out of you. I remember the exact way the syllables stacked up in my head while she was talking. I remember the paprika. I remember the way the light came through the crack in the door. I remember that I did not breathe for what felt like a full minute. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet, and she looked old, older than I had ever seen her, and she said, "You do not have to do anything with that. You can forget I said it, but I could not sleep if I did not tell you. Not again. Not after her." She squeezed my hand, and she opened the door, and she was gone, and I stood in that pantry with my head full of static. I went back to the party. I do not know how I did it, but I did. I smiled. I ate Carol's cake. I cheered for Todd when Danny's kid won cornhole. I was perfect, and nobody looked at me twice, and all the while I kept seeing that woman, Allie Hale, laughing like a bell at a table I was sitting at 6 years before I ever met him, telling the same story, getting the same whisper that was not a whisper, all of it on a loop. On the drive home, Nathan was in a great mood. He held my hand over the console. He sang along to the radio. He said, "You know I love you, right?" I said, "I know." And he said, "I just want us to be good. I want everyone to see what I see." And I nodded, and I watched the lake disappear behind us, and I felt like a stranger in my own skin. We got home, and he went to bed happy, and I lay awake next to him watching the ceiling fan turn, and I ran the whisper back over and over like a scratched song. The next morning, I asked him. I tried to make it light. I asked, "Hey, who's Allie? I heard the name somewhere. Is that an old girlfriend?" And I watched his face do something I have never seen a human face do. A flicker, like a window closing, there and gone in half a second. And then he smiled and said, "Allie, who? I don't know any Allie. You're probably thinking of my cousin's girlfriend from a few years back. She was a crunchy granola type. I think her name was Alice, actually." I said, "Oh, maybe," and dropped it. And the whole time I was thinking about how fast the lie had come, how smooth, zero friction, like a door that was always oiled. I let it go for a week. I played normal. I made dinner. I watched him watch football. I let him put his arm around me on the couch. And all week he was the man I married, funny and warm and quick to laugh. And twice I almost convinced myself that Carol had made a mistake, that she was an old woman misremembering, that the whole pantry scene had been a fever dream. And then one afternoon, looking for a spare charger in the top of his closet, I found the shoebox. It was a plain white sneaker box, taped, shoved behind a pile of sweaters, and I almost did not open it. But I did. Inside there was an old phone with a cracked screen, a tangle of chargers, a key fob from a car he no longer owned, and a ring box, the little velvet kind. And when I opened the ring box, it was empty. I turned it over, and there was an engraving on the inside of the lid, tiny, worn, and it said ANN June 14th, and under that, two words I will not repeat because they are not mine to repeat, but they were his handwriting. I know his handwriting. I have seen it on 100 cards. I stood in the closet with the box in my hand, and I understood that Carol had told me the truth, or some version of it, and I understood that I had been living inside a story someone else had already lived, once before me, in the same house, with the same words. I put the box back exactly where I found it, and I waited. The next week I met Carol for lunch, just the two of us, a little diner by the lake, and I did not even have to ask. She reached into her purse and slid a photograph across the table. It was a picture of a woman with red hair and big sunglasses, holding a fish on a dock, laughing. And Carol said, "That's her, that's Allie. That was taken the summer she was here. Nathan took it. He was the one holding the camera." I said, "How do you have this?" She said, "Because I kept it. I kept everything. I don't know why. I think I knew it would matter someday. I think I knew there would be another woman who deserved to see her face." I looked at the picture for a long time, at Allie's laugh, which was exactly the kind of laugh a person would describe as a bell. And I thought about how the same doc appears in a photo of my own, taken 3 years later, me holding the same fish in the same pose. Because Nathan likes that photo, he took it a dozen times until he got it right. I asked Carol if Nathan had ever been this way with her, and she laughed, not happy, and said no, he is his father's son. That move is riches through and through. My husband did the same thing to me at our daughter's christening, and I stayed, and sweetheart, I am not proud of being the kind of woman who stays, but I am telling you that you have a whole life in front of you and no babies and no mortgage, and you can walk out of this with nothing but your name, and I want you to know what I would give to have been told the same thing at your age. Before I had the 3 kids and the lake house and the 43 years of smiling at people who watched him do it to me, I drove home with the photograph in my glove box, and I cried the whole way home. And I think I was not even crying about Nathan at that point. I was crying about Carol, 43 years of standing on the other side of doors, and Allie, gone by August, and me, about to be told my own story by a woman who had lived it twice. I confronted Nathan that night. I waited until after dinner, and I put the photograph on the counter, face up, and I said her name. I said, "Allie Hale, I know about the ring box and the engraving and the doc photo. I know you told her she embarrassed you at that exact table. I know you told everyone she cheated, and I need you to tell me the truth, because if you can tell me the truth right now, we can figure out the rest of it together." And for a second, just a second, I saw him consider it. I saw the calculation move across his face like a cursor. And then he chose, he said, "I don't know what my mother has been telling you, but she is a lonely old woman who has hated me since I was a child, and she has spent 40 years poisoning everybody against me, and you are going to sit in my kitchen and believe her over me, over your husband, because she showed you a picture of some girl she made up or found on the internet. I'm sorry, that's insane, Claire. That is genuinely insane." And I said, "The box in your closet says A&N, June 14th. And he said, "That is from a jewelry store I used to work at. Tons of boxes had other people's initials on them. Do you want to go dig through my whole life? Is that who we are now?" And I said, "Nathan," and he said, "You need to decide if you are my wife or my mother's puppet. And if you can't answer that right now, I'm going to need you to think really hard about what you're doing to us." And I looked at him, this man I had loved, this man who had stood on a karaoke stage and been brave. And I saw that he was not the man in the story. He was the man who had written the story, and I had been a character in it the whole time. I said, "I'm going to sleep in the guest room tonight." He said, "Fine." And I saw relief flash in his eyes, like he thought he had won, because he had not thrown anything, he had not screamed, he had stayed completely reasonable. And in his world, staying reasonable is winning. I slept in the guest room, and I spent the night looking up Allie Hale in every corner of the internet, and I did not find a lot, but I found enough. A wedding announcement from 7 years ago, Public, N. Dawson, and A. Hale, a small town paper, and I found that the marriage had been dissolved a year later. No mention of cheating, just a quiet line in a court docket, and I found her on a social page for a pottery studio in Ohio, teaching classes, smiling, alive, and I stared at her face and I whispered, "Thank you." I don't know why. It felt like the right thing to say. The next day, Nathan escalated. He called my mother. He called my mother, Susan, who loves him, who thinks he hung the moon, and he told her that he was worried about me, that I had become paranoid, that I was accusing him of terrible things with no evidence, that my mother-in-law had been filling my head with nonsense, and that he needed her help getting me to see a doctor because he loved me and he did not want to lose me to this. My mother called me crying 40 minutes later. She said, "Honey, he is so scared. He loves you so much. He thinks you're having some kind of breakdown. Will you please just talk to him? And that was the moment I understood the trap completely. He was not violent. He was not even loud. He was doing it the way his father did it, the way all of them did it. He was making himself the reasonable one and me the problem, and he was recruiting my own mother to his side, and the only evidence I had was a whisper in a pantry and a photograph of a woman holding a fish. I told my mother, I'm not having a breakdown. I found out something about his past marriage, and he does not like it, and the line went quiet. And my mother said, What past marriage? And I said, Exactly, because he never told anyone. And there it was. For the first time, I could hear her hesitate. She said, Are you sure? And I said, I have a wedding announcement from a public record. I have the ring box. I have his mother. And my mother said, Okay, I am on your side, whatever side that is, but you need to get somewhere safe and you need to stop answering him because I have seen this show before and it never gets better before it gets worse. That night, my sister Jenna showed up at the door with a duffel bag and a bottle of wine because my mother had called her, and Jenna took one look at my face and said, Pack a week. And I said, A week for what? And she said, For the rest of your life. Now pack. I stood in my own closet with my sister, and I packed like I was packing for a funeral, slow and careful. My grandmother's lamp that Nathan had always hated, the quilt my mother made me, my good coat, and I did not take a single thing he had bought me. Not the earrings, not the watch, not any of it. Nathan came home while we were midway through. He walked into the bedroom and saw the duffel bag, and Jenna standing there with her arms crossed, and he did the switch. I watched him do it, the switch from the sad, reasonable husband to a man whose mouth had gone white. He said, Where do you think you're going? I said, To my sister's. For a few days, he said, You walk out that door and you don't come back. And I said, Okay. And I have never in my life said a word that felt more like taking my whole body back from somebody. It just fell out of me, quiet and finished, and he did not know what to do with it. He opened his mouth and closed it, and Jenna took my bag, and I walked past him, and I did not look back. I heard him calling after me as I got in the car, but I could not hear the words because my ears were full of that other voice, 43 years of it, and a girl with a laugh like a bell, gone by August. I thought, not me, not this August. I stayed with Jenna for 2 days, and I did not answer a single message he texted. I love you, please come home, and I did not answer. He texted, I'm sorry, I should have handled it better. We can talk to someone, we can go to counseling, and I did not answer. He texted, my mother called, and she's crying, Do you see what you're doing to this family? And I did not answer that one either. I got up on the third morning, and I called a lawyer. Her name was Gwen Marsh, and she was a short woman with a voice like gravel, and she listened to the whole thing, the pantry, the box, the photograph, the call to my mother, without writing a word. And when I finished, she said, This is a pattern I see every week, unhappily. And the good news is you found out before you had kids, and the better news is you found out while you still had the presence of mind to leave. And the best news is he already admitted you were never going to forgive him in a text message. Did he not? I said yes. He said he should have handled it better, she said. And did he ever admit to telling you a lie about a woman named Allie? Did you ever get him to confirm her existence to you? And I said no, and she said, Doesn't matter. I have a court record with his name on it. I have his mother. I have a photograph. And most importantly, I have 6 weeks of him doing nothing, which is a confession of a different kind. Now here is what you are going to do. You are going to stop reading his messages. You are going to screenshot everything your sister's phone catches, and you are going to let me send him one letter. I said, Will you put in the letter that I am not crazy? And Gwen looked at me over her glasses and she said, Sweetheart, I am going to put in the letter that you are represented, which is the only thing that has ever mattered to men like that. The letter went out, and 24 hours later, Nathan called me 12 times, and I watched the phone light up on the table at Jenna's, and I let it ring. The 11th call I answered. I do not know why. Maybe I wanted to hear it once more, the way a person holds a tooth to check if it still hurts. And he started sweet, the practice sweet, the voice he used when he wanted something. He said, Hi. I was so scared you weren't going to pick up. Listen, I have been thinking, I have been going to see someone. I can be better. We can fix this. You just have to come home and talk to me. No lawyers. Just us. We owe each other that. And I said, Nathan, I know about Allie, and I have the wedding announcement, and I know the doc photo, and I know you told everyone she was the problem, and the only thing I want from you now is for you to say her name, just once, say her name and mean it. And the line was quiet for 4 seconds. 4 seconds, I counted them, and then his voice changed, dropped about 5 degrees, and he said, "I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you are." And he hung up, and I stood in my sister's kitchen with the phone in my hand and my heart hammering, and I started to laugh, a real laugh, the kind that lives in your belly. And Jenna came running out of the bathroom with her hair wet and said, What? And I said, "He hung up." And she said, "On you." And I said, "On me." And she said, "Good. That is the whole marriage right there. That is the entire thing in one phone call." We drank wine on her porch, and I did not cry. I told her everything. The pantry, the whisper, Allie's laugh, the ringing sound of a bell, Carol's 43 years, the empty ring box, and somewhere in the middle of it, I realized I was telling it the way I would tell it if I ever had to explain it, clean, in order, and I thought, this is how you know it's real. When it tells itself back to you like a story you already know. On Friday, I went back to the house one last time to get the rest of my things, and I went while Nathan was at work. With Jenna and my mother and a man from Gwen's office, I walked through the rooms I had decorated, the curtains I had picked, the wall I had painted, and I felt nothing, less than nothing, the way you feel nothing walking through a hotel room. I took my grandmother's lamp out of the living room, and I left the earrings and the watch and the ring on the dresser. I left the ring in the velvet box, the one he had proposed with, and I put it in the drawer where I had found the other box, and I thought, let him find it there. Let him understand what I found there. Carol called me the next day. She said, "He knows I told you." He came over and screamed at me. He called me a traitor, which is the funniest word I have ever heard come out of that boy's mouth, and I said, "I don't care. I have 43 years of keeping a man's secrets, and I am retired from it." I told her about Gwen's letter and the 4 seconds of silence and the phone call, and she said, "He hung up on you." And I said, "He did." And she said, "Good. Now you know you were never going to win an argument with him, so don't have one." And then she said, "You know I am not leaving Rich. I have known that for 30 years. And I said, "I know." And she said, "But I am glad you're leaving him. I just need you to know that I am living in that house on purpose, and you are getting out of it by accident, and I think that makes you the lucky one." The papers are drafted now. Gwen called me this morning and said, "The petition is ready. All I have to do is sign." And I have been sitting on Jenna's porch with the pages in my lap for an hour, reading my own life summarized in the cold language of forms, the date we married, the date we separated, the name of the professional who will divide the small things we own. Nathan sent one more message this afternoon, a long one. I read the first line and then I deleted it because Gwen told me not to read his messages, and I am done letting him write the story. I am going to sign the papers tonight with my mother's pen, the one she used to sign her own divorce papers 19 years ago, and then I am going to take the photograph of Allie Hale out of my glove box and mail it back to Carol with a note that just says, "Thank you." And I have been thinking about what I said to Jenna on the phone that night, the thing I did not know I was going to say until it was out of my mouth. I am not Allie, and I was not lying, but I understand now that I could have been, that I almost was, that I was one pantry door away from being another girl whose name got buried in a box. I signed the papers at 4 o'clock. My mother will be here, and Jenna, and we will probably drink wine out of the bottle and eat cereal straight from the box, and I will probably laugh, that same laugh, the one that got me into this and out of this, and I will think about Allie Hale in Ohio teaching pottery classes, and Carol at the lake house mixing her potato salad with the same hands that held a photograph for 6 years, and I will think about how the only thing that saved me was a woman whispering the truth into my ear in a pantry that smelled like paprika. I hope my laugh never sounds like a bell. I hope I am never anybody's story again, and if I am, I already know who to call. Story 4. My daughter refused to let me meet her baby. 3 months later, I received a package from her. I made the drive to Asheville 3 times after Claire told me she was pregnant, and 3 times she found a reason not to see me. The first time, Marcus had a work thing. The second time, the dog was sick. The third time, she just didn't answer her phone, and when she finally texted back at 11 that night, she said she was sorry, she was exhausted, she was getting sick herself, and she'd love to try again next month. I told her that was fine. I told her I loved her. I told her to drink water. She sent back the little purple heart that she sends when she doesn't know what else to say. That was January. I am 61 years old. My name is Margaret Holloway, though everyone except my daughter and my late husband's mother has called me Maggie since I was about 23. I live alone in a little green and white craftsman bungalow on Grove Park Drive in Marietta, Georgia, in the same house my husband Carl and I bought in 1993 for $138,000, which felt, at the time, like a number so huge I had to write it down on the back of an envelope and stare at it for a few minutes. Carl died of pancreatic cancer in the spring of 2021, 14 months after the diagnosis, and I have lived in this house by myself ever since. The wallpaper in the hallway is the same wallpaper we picked out together in a little shop on the square in downtown Marietta. The grout in the kitchen tile is the same grout Carl laid down the summer I was pregnant with Claire, when he insisted he could do it himself and then spent 4 days on his knees swearing under his breath and watching YouTube videos of Portuguese tilers. I never had the heart to redo any of it. It is too much a part of the house. It is too much a part of him. We had one child, Claire. She was born in August of 1992 at Kenstone Hospital in Marietta, 8 pounds 2 ounces, a shockingly angry little creature who came out so red in the face and screaming so loud that the nurse laughed and said, "Lord, this one's going to have opinions." She was right. Claire has always had opinions. She was a serious child. Quiet, watchful, prone to spending long afternoons organizing her rock collection by color and approximate weight and reading well above her age level from about second grade on. She was also a child who felt things very, very deeply. When her grandfather died in 2002, she didn't cry at the funeral. She didn't cry on the way home. She cried in the laundry room at 3 in the morning, 3 weeks later, with a basket of clean towels in her lap. I walked in and found her there and sat down on the floor and didn't say anything, just put my arm around her until she was ready. That is the kind of person Claire has always been. She does not break in public. She breaks slowly, alone, in rooms where no one can see. She went to Lassiter High School here in Cobb County, graduated in 2010, went to UNC Chapel Hill on a partial scholarship, came back south with a degree in graphic design and a boyfriend from Charlotte named Marcus Scott. Marcus is 7 years older than she is. He has a salt and pepper beard and a kind, soft voice and the kind of opinions about bourbon that I have never really understood but have always been polite about. He works in commercial real estate. He has a house in a neighborhood called Hawk Creek, just east of downtown Asheville, that he bought with his brother in 2018 and then bought his brother out of in 2021. He and Claire got married in 2022 on the back lawn of the Hawk Creek house in May with about 75 people. I wore a dusty blue dress. Carl had been dead almost a year. I cried during the vows and pretended it was allergies. I'm telling you all of this because the wedding was the first real fracture. I want to be honest about that. I think about that day a lot, and I don't pretend that everything was fine before it. Things were not fine before it. They were mostly fine. But there was a beginning of something that became worse, and I want to put it on the page in the right order. Marcus's mother is a woman named Dolores Scott. She is a perfectly nice person. She drives a white Lexus and belongs to a book club and brings a casserole to every event she is invited to. She also has, in my opinion, a slightly too firm grip on the steering wheel of her son's marriage. I do not say this lightly. I have thought about it for years. I have talked it over with my therapist, Dr. Chen, who has an office over by the Marietta Square, and who I started seeing in the fall of 2021 after the funeral home released Carl's ashes, and I did not know what to do with them for about 3 weeks. Dr. Chen is the kind of therapist who lets you talk for a while and then writes one sentence down on her notepad and nods. Dolores is the kind of mother-in-law who brings opinions to weddings. They are not the same category, but the energy is adjacent. When Claire and Marcus got engaged in the spring of 2021, Dolores started texting me. I have to admit, I was not quick enough on the uptake about what those texts were. Dolores is a texter. She sends long, considered texts with bullet points and emojis and the kind of paragraphs that read like a small business owner replying to a customer service inquiry. She texted things like, "Do you think Claire would prefer the Country Club of Asheville or the Grove Park Inn for the reception?" Marcus mentioned Claire likes gardenias. I was thinking white and green palette. Thoughts? I have a friend who does lighting. He did the Biltmore wedding last year. Would it be okay if I looped him in? I tried to be helpful. I answered the questions. I said gardenias were Claire's favorite, but also that Claire had mentioned wanting ranunculus. Dolores replied, "Oh, I didn't know. I will check with Marcus." It still stings a little that Claire's mother was a kind of secondary source, that my information went through Marcus back to Dolores and then back to me like I was being photocopied. The bigger issue, which I did not altogether avoid, was the cost. Dolores and Marcus together decided they would pay for the reception, the band, and the flowers. Carl and I had died and gone to heaven, and I had a small amount of money from his life insurance, and I offered, very early, to pay for the rehearsal dinner. Dolores wrote me back a long text explaining, in effect, that she had already taken care of the rehearsal dinner, and she appreciated my generosity, and she hoped I understood that she only wanted her son to have a wonderful day. I read it twice. I replied, "Of course I understand. Let me know if there is anything I can do to help." I meant it when I wrote it. I am not the kind of person who says kind things they do not mean. I have never been that kind of person. But the buried note in her text, the part that read, when I read between the lines like a small drawing of a velvet rope, was a thing I felt. I called Dr. Chen about it, in fact, in early June of 2021. She asked me what I thought the source of my upset was. I told her I thought it was that I wanted to feel useful to my daughter's wedding. She asked if I had told Claire that. I said no. She asked why not. I said because Claire will get upset. Claire will feel like she has to choose. And I will lose, Doctor. Chen nodded, wrote one word down on her notepad, and said, "Okay." I do not know what word she wrote. I have always wondered. I think it might have been mother. In the end, I contributed money to the wedding in the form of a check I slipped into Claire's card at the bridal shower, along with a copy of the children's book Carl used to read to her when she was little. The check was for $14,000. I can tell you that number because it is the exact total of Carl's final paycheck from Delta, where he had worked as a senior engineer for 32 years, plus a little I added from the flower money my sister Linda sent me after the funeral. Claire texted, "Mom, oh my gosh, this is too much. You did not have to do this." I said, "I wanted to. Use it however you want. For the wedding, for the down payment on a house, for a trip, it's yours." She replied, "Thank you. I love you. I am going to cry." I cried too. I sat on the porch swing and I cried. At the reception, Dolores gave a toast. Marcus gave a toast. Claire's college roommate Becca gave a toast. I was not asked to give a toast. I do not think anyone not asked me, exactly. I think it was just understood among the people planning things that I was not on the list. Dolores' friend who did the lighting sent me a glass of wine at the table, which was actually a kind gesture. I drank it. I watched Claire dance with Marcus to Fade Into You. I watched her dance with her uncle. I watched Marcus dance with his mother, and Dolores, smiling, mouthed thank you over his shoulder to no one in particular. I went home that night and sat in the kitchen with the light off for about 45 minutes. I do not know what I was doing. I was just sitting there. The clock on the microwave ticked. The fridge hummed. I thought about calling Carl. I have done that since he died more than I would ever admit to anyone except Dr. Chen. I do not literally call him. I just pick up my phone and look at his name in my contacts and put the phone back down. It is a habit. It is a comfort. It is also, I think, a kind of prayer. Okay, so that was the wedding. After the wedding, Claire and I were fine. We texted. We talked on the phone every other Sunday at 4 in the afternoon Eastern Time, a habit Claire started when she moved to Asheville in 2014 and has kept up with admirable discipline for almost 12 years. She would tell me about her work. I would tell her about my garden. We would talk about the dog, a rescue Australian Shepherd mix named Pony, who sleeps on Marcus's feet every night and once ate a whole stick of butter off the counter. We would talk about the house. We would talk about whether or not Marcus was going to finally repaint the kitchen. The calls were good. I looked forward to them. I would set out a cup of coffee and a small plate of shortbread at 2:15, sit in the chair in the sunroom, and wait for her name to come up on the screen at 4 sharp. In the spring of 2024, Claire called me on a Wednesday, which was unusual. She does not call me on Wednesdays. Wednesdays, she has a standing call with her sister-in-law, Kelly, who lives in Greenville. I picked up anyway. She said, "Mom, I have news. Can I tell you something?" I said, "Of course." She said, "I'm pregnant." I sat down. I did not even realize I was not sitting down until I felt the chair under me. I said, "Oh, honey, oh my God." She laughed. She was crying. I was crying. She said, "I wanted you to know first. Before I told Marcus's mom, before I posted anything, I wanted you first." I said, "Baby, I am so happy. I am so happy for you." She said, "We are so happy. It's early, like 8 weeks, but everything looks good." I have been so sick, Mom. I have been so sick I cannot even tell you. I said, "Does Marcus know?" She said, "He knows. He has been incredible. He gets up and makes me toast at like 6:30 every morning." I said, "Good, good. That is what he should do." She said, "I wanted to ask you something." I said, "Anything." She said, "Will you come to the shower? Dolores is planning a shower for me in August. Will you come?" I said yes before I even knew what else to say. I said, "Of course, honey. Of course I will come." I would like to be able to tell you that what happened between then and the baby's arrival in November is anything other than what it was. I cannot. What happened is what happened. Dolores, as predicted, took the shower and ran with it. I was invited to the shower. I was on the guest list. I was not on the planning list. The centerpieces were very tasteful. The cake was from a bakery in West Asheville I have never been to. The games were very tasteful. The favors were small jars of local honey tied with twine and a tag that read, "A sweet beginning for baby S." They did not know the name yet, and I did not know the name yet. I drove up the day before the shower. I stayed at a Comfort Inn off Tunnel Road. I went to the shower. I brought a gift. The gift was a quilt I had pieced together myself over the previous 11 months, out of fabrics I had been collecting since Claire was about 6. I had started it as a kind of heirloom project, partly for the baby, partly because I needed something to do with my hands after Carl died. I have always needed something to do with my hands. I pieced it on the dining room table, on the porch, in the sunroom. I finished it in July and folded it up in tissue paper and drove it to Asheville in the passenger seat of my Volvo. Claire opened it at the shower and her face did something I will remember for the rest of my life. She pressed her lips together. She ran her thumb over a square of fabric that had been cut from a receiving blanket she had been wrapped in at the hospital. She looked up at me. She said, "Mom, this is so beautiful." I said, "It is for the baby." "So she has something from us, from me, from your dad." Her face did the thing again, and she nodded and said, "Thank you." Dolores, standing about 6 feet away with a glass of white wine, smiled at me and said, "What a thoughtful gift." She said it exactly like that. I said thank you. The shower was otherwise very nice. Becca flew in from Brooklyn. Kelly drove up from Greenville. The food was good. The cake was good. I did not know many people there, which is the small town hallway version of being the mother of the bride at a wedding you did not help plan. I sat next to a woman named Gail who had driven in from Hendersonville and who is the mother of one of Marcus's high school friends. She was lovely. We two talked about azaleas. We agreed that endless summer hydrangeas are overrated. I left at about 3:30, gave Claire a hug in the driveway, told her to call me if she needed anything, drove back to the Comfort Inn, and ordered a slice of pizza from a place called Mellow Mushroom and ate it in bed watching Law and Order reruns. I should pause here, before I go further, and say what I think happened next. I don't know for sure. I am giving you my best understanding, which is also the only understanding I have. If you have ever been the mother who is loved but not consulted, you will understand that you do not always know when you are being slowly pushed off the island. Sometimes you only know after you are in the water. In September, Marcus called me. He had never called me directly before. He had always texted. He called on a Sunday, in the early afternoon, about 20 minutes after Claire's regular 4 o'clock call window. And when I picked up, he said, "Hey, Margaret, it's Marcus. How are you doing?" I said I was fine. How are you? He said he was good. He said, "Listen, I want to ask you something, and I want to ask you honestly, and I want you to be honest back." I said, "Of course." He said, "Where do you stand on vaccines?" I am, for the record, not against vaccines. I have had every vaccine Dr. Choi has ever suggested I have. I got the COVID vaccine the first week I was eligible, in early 2021, in the back of a Hy-Vee in Marietta. I got my shingles vaccine, I got my pneumonia vaccine. I had Claire vaccinated on the exact schedule that her pediatrician Dr. Friedman recommended in 1992, with the exception of one dose I delayed by 2 weeks because she had a fever. I think it's fair to say, not anti-vaccine. But I understood, when Marcus asked me that the question was not really about vaccines. The question was about whether Claire and Marcus had decided not to vaccinate their child, and whether I was going to be a problem about it. I said, "Marcus, I am not against vaccines. I am not going to bring it up. You and Claire are the parents. I trust you," he said. "That's what I figured. I just wanted to be on the same page." I said, "We are." That call was a small thing. But small things are how a person gets pushed off the island. I have thought about that call a lot. In October, I asked Claire, on our usual Sunday call, if there was anything I could do to help before the baby came. I offered to come up and help her set up the nursery. I offered to cook a few dinners that she could freeze. I offered to come for the weekend after the baby was born so I could be in town in case she needed me to run errands. Claire said, "Mom, I love you, but I think for the first couple weeks we just want to be us. Just me and Marcus and the baby. I hope you understand." I said, "Of course I understand. I just want you to know that I am here." She said, "I know that." She said, "I know that, Mom." I said, "Will you call me when she is born?" She said, "Of course I will. The second I am out of recovery, I will call you." I said, "Okay." I said, "I love you." She said, "I love you too, Mom." The baby was due on November 12th. On the morning of November 9, I was at Publix on Johnson Ferry Road, pushing a cart around the produce section, when my phone rang. It was Claire. She said, "Mom, my water broke. We are going to the hospital. It's happening." I dropped a bunch of bananas on the floor. Someone gave me a look. I said, "Oh baby, oh my God. I am so happy." She said, "I am terrified. I am shaking. I have to go." I said, "I love you. I love you so much. Call me when you can." She said, "I will. I love you." I drove home. I packed a bag. I called my sister Linda in Chattanooga. I told her Claire was in labor. Linda said, "Do you want me to come with you?" I said, "No. I think I should go alone. I think she wants it to be small." Linda said, "Okay, call me." I got in the Volvo. I drove to Asheville. It is a 4-hour and 40-minute drive from Marietta to Haw Creek, depending on traffic and how many times you stop, and I made it in about 4.5 hours. I drove slower than I usually drive because of the ice on the higher elevations. I pulled into the parking lot of Mission Hospital at about 5:30 in the afternoon. I texted Claire. I said, "I am here. Let me know when you are ready for me." She did not text back. I waited. I sat in the lobby of the maternity ward for about 40 minutes. I read a magazine. I do not remember which magazine. I read it anyway. Marcus came down at about 6:15. He was wearing scrubs. He had a face on him I had not seen before. I do not know how to describe it. He had a face on him like a man who has been told to deliver a message. He sat down next to me. He said, "Margaret, Claire asked me to come down and talk to you. She is doing great. She is in active labor. Everything is fine." I said, "Great. Should I come up?" He said, "She wants it to be just us right now. She wants it to be just her and me in the room. I am so sorry. She just asked if I would come tell you." I said, "Okay." I said, "Of course." I said, "Tell her I love her." He said, "I will." I asked if I could at least wait in the waiting room until the baby was born. He said, "I think it would be better if you went home. She doesn't want the pressure of knowing you are out here, and she doesn't want anyone to come up after. I am so sorry, Margaret." I said, "Okay." I said, "Will you call me when the baby is born?" He said, "Yes. I will call you the second she is here." I went back to the Volvo. I sat in it for about 10 minutes. I called my sister Linda. Linda said, "Are you okay?" I said, "She doesn't want me here." Linda said, "Oh, Maggie." I said, "It's okay. She has a right. It's her birth. It's her baby." Linda said, "Of course she has a right. But Maggie." I said, "I want to drive home. I think I should drive home." Linda said, "Do you want me to come get you?" I said, "No, I want to drive home. I want to be in my own house." Linda said, "Okay. Call me when you get in." I drove home. I cried for about an hour in shifts on and off all the way down 575. I stopped at a Waffle House outside of Canton to use the bathroom and to drink a cup of coffee. The waitress looked like she wanted to say something to me. She didn't. I tipped her $7 and got back in the car. I got home at about 11:30. I sat on the porch swing. I did not turn on the light. I looked at my phone. Marcus called at 11:48. He said, "Margaret, she is here. She is beautiful. 7 pounds 5 ounces. They are both doing great. Claire wanted me to tell you." I said, "What's her name?" He said they named her Eleanor. Eleanor Margaret Scott. Claire wanted me to tell you that. I did not say anything for a moment. I sat on the porch swing and did not say anything about that. Eleanor Margaret. After me. After me and her grandmother. I do not know if Dolores knows that. I assume Dolores knows that. I assume Dolores is fine with it. I said, "Marcus, thank you. Thank you for calling me. Please tell Claire I love her. Please tell her I love her and the baby." He said, "I will. I am so sorry about tonight." I said, "Don't be sorry. Take care of your wife. Take care of your daughter." He said, "I will." We hung up. I thought for about 10 minutes that I would sleep. I did not sleep. I sat up until about 3 in the morning. I called Dr. Chen's after hours line. Dr. Chen answered. I said, "Hi, it's Maggie. I'm sorry to call so late." She said, "What's going on?" I said, "My daughter named the baby after me and won't let me come to the hospital." She said, "Oh, Maggie." She said, "Where are you right now?" I said, "I'm on my porch." She said, "Can you go inside?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Will you go inside?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Will you take your shoes off and pour a glass of water?" I said, "Yes." She said, "I'm going to stay on the phone until you do it." She did. She stayed on the phone with me for about 12 minutes. She did not give me advice. She just stayed on the phone. The next day, I drove to the post office in Marietta Square and shipped a box to Asheville. The box contained a small silver baby cup engraved Eleanor Margaret Scott, November 9, 2024, a copy of Goodnight Moon, a tiny white cardigan I had knit during the summer, and a pair of knitted booties. The card I put inside the box read, Welcome to the world, Eleanor. I love you already. Grandma Maggie, I did not hear back. I did not expect to. I went to work. I work part-time at a small stationery shop on the square called Quill and Page. The owner is a woman named Yvonne Cho. I have worked there since 2019 after the first wave of grief when Carl had been dead about 9 months and I needed to get out of the house or I would lose my mind. I do the books. I order inventory, I greet customers, I make the coffee. It is not a difficult job, it is a kind job. Yvonne is a kind boss. She said, when I came back the Monday after the baby's birth, how are you doing? I said, okay. She said, that's the truth? I said, part of the truth. She nodded. She said, tell me when you want to tell me more. The weeks after Eleanor's birth were the longest of my life, and I am including the weeks after Carl's diagnosis. I texted Claire twice. The first text on November 12, I sent a photo of the front of the box. I said, sent you a little something. Hope she likes it. I love you. She replied, thank you, Mom. That was sweet of you. She did not reply to the second text, which I sent on November 18, which said, just checking in. Thinking of you. Hope you and Eleanor are doing well. I am here if you need anything. Mom. On November 24, I called Claire's 4 o'clock on a Sunday. She did not pick up. She texted at about 5. Sorry, Mom. Lost track of time. Babies are a lot. Haha. Talk soon. I texted, I love you. No pressure. Just wanted you to know I am thinking about you, she replied. I called Dr. Chen on Wednesday. I told her the situation. She asked me what I thought the source of the distance was. I said, I think Marcus is afraid I will have opinions about parenting. I think Dolores is afraid I will be a bigger grandmother than she wants me to be. I think Claire is tired and overwhelmed and has chosen to make the early months small because that is what she is being told to do. Dr. Chen said, and what do you think your part in it is? I said, I think I am a person who has opinions and who has historically had trouble keeping them to myself. She said, okay, that is a useful thing to know. I did not send anything else for Christmas. I waited until December 26, when I figured the gift opening would be over and the dust would have settled, and I sent a small envelope with a check for $500 and a card that said, for Eleanor's college fund or for diapers. Whatever you need, Grandma. Claire replied on December 27. Thank you, Mom. So generous. I did not push. I did not send long letters. I did not ask to come visit. I did not ask for photos. I did not call at 4 on Sundays. I just waited. In January, I got a text from Claire that was 3 paragraphs long. She said that Marcus's father, a man named Gerald Scott, who lives in a house on the river in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, had had a minor stroke over the New Year weekend, and that Marcus was going to fly down for a long weekend to help his mother. She said she would be alone with the baby for 4 days. She asked if I would come. I think in my life I have never packed a bag faster. I arrived on a Friday afternoon. Claire opened the door. She looked thinner than I had last seen her. She had dark under her eyes. The baby was asleep in a carrier on the floor. Claire gave me a hug that lasted about 6 seconds longer than her usual hugs. She said, Mom, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so tired. I said, I know, baby, I know. I picked up the baby carrier very gently, and I carried it into the living room. I did not ask if I could. I just did it. Claire did not stop me. I spent 4 days in Claire's house. I held Eleanor when Claire needed to sleep. I made Claire 3 dinners, a chicken pot pie, a pot of beef stew, and a big pan of mac and cheese with breadcrumbs on top, all of which are my mother's recipes and which I have made for Claire since she was a little girl. I did the dishes. I folded 2 loads of laundry. I walked Pony around the block twice. I drank coffee with Claire at 7 in the morning and again at 3 in the afternoon, and she told me about the baby, about how Eleanor only sleeps if you hold her, about how a lactation consultant named Renee came to the house on Tuesday, about how Marcus calls every night at 9 and reads Eleanor a chapter of Charlotte's Web over FaceTime. I nodded. I cried a little in my coffee when she told me that. I did not let her see. I am not the kind of grandmother who cries in front of her grandchild. Claire did not bring up the hospital. I did not bring up the hospital. On Sunday afternoon, before I drove home, I gave Eleanor a kiss on the forehead and I said, I love you, little Eleanor. I gave Claire a hug. I told her I would come back. She said, thank you, Mom. Thank you for everything. I'll call you. I'll call you this week. She called me on Wednesday. She called me the Sunday after that. We went back sort of to the regular rhythm. I sent Eleanor a small stuffed rabbit for Valentine's Day that I had bought at a shop in Asheville in October, and Claire sent me a photo of Eleanor holding it, with a smile on her face, captioned, she loves it. In March, I asked Claire very gently, over the phone, if she would like me to come down for Eleanor's 4-month appointment. She said, that's in April. I think Marcus is going to take her. I think we are going to take her together. But thank you, Mom. I said, of course, tell me how it goes. I got a text 2 days later from Claire's phone number, but it was Marcus. It said, hey, Margaret, I wanted to talk to you about something. Can you call me when you have a minute? I called. He said, listen, I need to ask you something, and I want to ask you honestly. I said, okay. He said, "What are your views on pacifiers?" I said, "I don't have strong views on pacifiers." "Why?" He said, "Claire and I have decided not to use them. We just wanted to make sure you are on the same page if you are watching Eleanor." I said, "Marcus, I am on whatever page you and Claire are on. I do not have views on pacifiers." "I literally do not have views on pacifiers." He said, "Okay, sorry to bother you." I sat in the sunroom with the phone in my lap and I cried. It was, I think, the second to last time I cried about this for a while. I am not the mother who cries all the time. I cried, and then I put the phone down. I went to the kitchen. I made a cup of tea. I called my sister Linda. Linda said, "What is it now?" I said, "Marcus called me to ask about pacifiers." She said, "What?" I said, "He called to ask me about my views on pacifiers." Linda was quiet for a moment. Linda is 65. Linda has 3 children and 7 grandchildren, and has the kind of perspective that comes from being the older sister of a woman whose husband died too young. She said, "Maggie, you know what is happening, right?" I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Maggie, they are deciding in real time what kind of grandmother you are allowed to be. And they are deciding it without asking you." I said, "I think they are deciding what kind of parents they want to be." Linda said, "Yes, but they are using you as the excuse for those decisions." I did not have a response to that. I have thought about it every day since. I think Linda was right. I think Linda was right, and I think it is one of the most painful things my sister has ever said to me. April passed. May, June. I sent Eleanor a pair of hand-knit overalls in April for Easter. I sent her a first book in May, a copy of The Tale of Peter Rabbit. I sent her a small sunflower print dress in June. Claire thanked me for each of them. She sent me small videos sometimes of Eleanor rolling over, of Eleanor laughing, of Eleanor in the high chair covered in mashed banana. I saved every video. I have a folder on my phone called Ellie with 47 videos in it. I watched them when I cannot sleep. In June, I drove to Asheville for the day just to drop off a check for Eleanor's summer clothes, and I asked if I could stop by for an hour. Claire said, "Mom, it's not a great day. Marcus is in a mood." Pony threw up on the rug. "Can we reschedule?" I said, "Of course. Next week?" She said, "Yes, next week for sure." Next week, Marcus's mother was in town. Next month, Marcus had a work thing. I stopped asking. In July, on a Wednesday afternoon around 2 o'clock, my doorbell rang. I was not expecting anyone. I opened the front door and there was a package on the porch. It was a brown cardboard shipping box, about the size of a shoebox, and the return address label in the upper left corner read, in Claire's handwriting, C. Scott, 14 Hickory Hill RD, Asheville, NC. The postmark was July 9. I picked the box up, I carried it inside. I put it on the dining room table where I have pieced a lot of quilts. I sat down at the table. I did not open it right away. I sat with it for about 15 minutes. I called Dr. Chen's office. Dr. Chen was not available. Her receptionist, a woman named Tanya, asked if I wanted to leave a message. I said, "Yes." "Can you tell Dr. Chen that Maggie Holloway received an unexpected package from her daughter and is going to open it when we talk? I will call her back at 5 if that works." Tanya said, "Of course, Maggie. She will call you at 5. I waited until 5. Dr. Chen called. I said, "I got a package from Claire." She said, "Okay. How are you feeling?" I said, "I do not know. I have been sitting with it for 3 hours. She said, "Do you want to open it now?" I said, "Yes." "Will you stay on the phone with me?" She said, "Yes." I opened the box with the small paring knife I keep in the kitchen drawer. I cut the tape along the center seam slowly, the way you cut something you have been waiting for and are not sure you should open. Inside, there were 3 things and a small envelope taped to the inside of the lid. The first thing on top was a small cardboard box from a baby store called Wildflower Baby in Asheville. I knew it because Claire had sent me a photo of the storefront once, with a little sun shining through the window. Inside the box was a soft cotton baby blanket, very small, with a hand-stitched E in the corner. The blanket was new. It still had the store tag on it. The second thing was a small silver picture frame, about 4 inches by 4 inches, with a photo of Eleanor inside. The photo was taken in Claire and Marcus's backyard. Eleanor was sitting on a quilt on the grass. She was looking up at something above the camera, probably Marcus, and she was smiling with that wide, gummy, 4-month-old smile that you cannot fake. She had on a yellow dress with tiny lemons on it. I have no idea who bought that dress. I did not buy that dress. The third thing at the bottom was the quilt I had made her. The quilt I had spent 11 months piecing together out of the fabrics I had been collecting since Claire was a little girl. The quilt I had driven to Asheville in the passenger seat of my Volvo. It had been washed. I could tell because it still had a faint, warm smell of lavender detergent. It had also been folded very carefully, in the way that someone who knows how to fold a quilt folds a quilt. It had a small note pinned to one of the squares. The note was in Dolores's handwriting, which I would recognize anywhere, because she has the same careful cursive she uses on all of her Christmas cards. The note read, Maggie, she used this every night for the first 3 months. Thank you for making it. I sat there with Dr. Chen on the phone, and I did not say anything for a long moment. I said, she used it. She used it. She sent it back to me, but she used it. Dr. Chen said, yes. I said, why would she send it back if she used it? Dr. Chen said, I don't know. What else is in the box? The envelope. The envelope was taped to the inside of the lid of the box. It was unsealed. Inside, there was a single piece of Claire's stationery. She has this stationery, a soft cream cardstock with her and Marcus's return address printed in a small gray font at the top. Claire and Marcus Scott, 14 Hickory Hill Road, Asheville, and on the inside of the card, in Claire's careful hand, was this: Mom, I'm sorry I haven't called. There is too much to say, and I don't know how to say any of it. I love you. I love Eleanor. I want you to know her. I want you to come to her first birthday. There is so much I want to say. I don't know how to say it yet. The blanket smells like your house. She would only sleep under it. Marcus and I argued about it twice. He wanted me to put it away. I didn't. I'm sorry. I have to go. She is crying. I love you. See, that was it. That was the whole letter. That was the whole package. I sat at the dining room table with the phone in one hand and the card in the other, and I cried for what I think was the first real cry I have had in months. Dr. Chen stayed on the phone. She did not say anything. I said, finally, I don't know what this means. She said, what do you think it means? I said, I think she is asking me to come to the birthday. She said, what else do you think it means? I said, I think she is telling me the truth, and she is not ready to tell me the rest of the truth. She said, what do you think the rest of the truth is? I said, I think Dolores is asking her to put me at a distance, and Marcus is going along with it, and Claire is somewhere in the middle of it and doesn't know how to be in the middle of it. I think she is too tired to fight about it right now. I think she is asking me to wait. She said, okay. Can you wait? I said, I have been waiting. She said, can you keep waiting? I said, yes. I think I can keep waiting. I called my sister Linda at 6. I told her about the package. Linda did not say anything for a long moment. Then Linda said, did you tell her you would come to the birthday? I said, I haven't called her back. Linda said, are you going to call her back? I said, I don't know. Linda said, you are going to call her back. I said, Linda. Linda said, Maggie, she named the baby after you. She sent you back the blanket, washed, with a note from her mother-in-law. She sent a picture. She said she wants you at the birthday. You are going to call her back. I said, okay. Linda said, call her tomorrow. Not tonight, tomorrow. Let it settle. I said, okay. I called her the next morning. She picked up on the second ring. She said, Mom, hi. She sounded tired. She sounded also like she had been waiting for me to call. I said, Claire, I got the package. Thank you. She said, I didn't know if I should send it. I said, no, I am so glad you did. She said, I have been wanting to call you. I said, I know. She said, I haven't known what to say. I said, you don't have to know what to say. You never have to know what to say. You can just call me. She was quiet. Then she said, Mom, would you come to Eleanor's birthday? I said, yes. Of course I will come, she said. It is going to be small. It's at our house. It will just be us, and Marcus's parents, and Becca and her girlfriend, and maybe Kelly if she drives up. I don't know if Dolores, she stopped. She said, I want you there. I want you there more than anything. I said, I will be there, Claire. She said, Mom, I have to tell you something. I said, okay. She said, I am not ready to tell you yet. I said, okay. She said, will you wait? I said, yes. She said, I love you. I said, I love you too. I love you and I love Eleanor. I will see you in November. She said, thank you, Mom. That is where I am right now. That is the moment I am sitting in. I called Dr. Chen again on Friday. I told her what Claire said. I told her what Claire didn't say. I told her I had a flight booked to Asheville on November 7, my own ticket, my own hotel, my own rental car, and that I am bringing a small gift, that I will not stay at Claire and Marcus's house, that I will stay at the same Comfort Inn off Tunnel Road, and that I will be there, in the driveway, at 1 o'clock on the afternoon of November 9, in the same chair I sat in last time when I was not allowed to be inside. Dr. Chen said, Maggie. I said, I know. She said, what do you most want to happen that day? I said, I want to hold Eleanor. She was quiet for a long moment. She said, and if you can't? I said, then I will stand in the driveway, and I will say, happy birthday, and I will go home. She said, okay, that is a very good second thing. I do not know what is going to happen. I am sitting on the porch swing, writing this, on a Wednesday afternoon in late July, with a glass of iced tea and pony on the closed laptop of Carl's old desk that I have moved to the porch. The ceiling fan is turning. The fountain in the front yard is off because I can't find the part I need to fix it. The lavender is finally blooming along the side fence. The package from Claire is in the guest room closet, on the shelf above the extra blankets, next to the baby cup and the cardigan and the booties. I have not watched the videos of Eleanor in 2 days because I thought I would give myself a break. I have written this whole thing down because I have spent the last 3 months not telling anyone what is going on, except Dr. Chen and Linda and Yvonne at Quill and Page, who finally cornered me in the back room one afternoon in late June and said, "Maggie, are you okay?" And don't say yes. I told her the truth. She gave me a hug in the back room, between the boxes of greeting cards and the coffee maker. She said, "You let me know if you need anything." Yvonne is a Korean-American woman from Seoul, age 54, who never had children of her own and who has been my boss for 6 years and who has never once, in 6 years, said anything unkind to me or made me feel like anything other than a useful, competent, liked person. She's one of the best people I have ever met, and I am grateful to her in a way I do not know how to say. I do not know what I am hoping for exactly. I am not hoping for a movie moment. I am not hoping for Claire to call me tomorrow and say, "Mom, I have been wrong about everything. Please come right now." I am not hoping for Marcus to apologize. I am not hoping for Dolores to text me a long, bullet-pointed apology. I am not hoping for a reconciliation with confetti. I am hoping mostly, I think, for what I think anyone in my position is hoping for, which is just to be allowed in the room. Just to be allowed to sit on the floor of my granddaughter's nursery and hold her for 10 minutes and tell her that her grandmother is a quiet, careful woman named Maggie, who is 61 years old, who lives in a green and white bungalow in Marietta, who has a porch swing that needs to be repainted, who has a fountain in the front yard that is currently broken, who has a sister named Linda, who has a friend named Carl up in heaven, who has a boss named Yvonne who makes very good coffee, and who would love, more than almost anything else in the world, to be allowed to say hello. I do not know if I am going to be allowed, but I have a ticket, and I have a hotel room, and I have a small gift wrapped in tissue paper on the dining room table. It is a small quilted wall hanging, with Eleanor's name on it, and a little yellow bird in the corner, and it is the last piece of fabric I had from the bundle I bought in 1992 when I was first pregnant with Claire at a small shop on Brady Avenue that has since closed. I think, if I am being honest, that this is the most important thing I have ever made with my hands. Story 5. My sister said I would never afford the family cabin. Then she saw who signed the contract. The coffee was still hot when my sister said it. I remember the steam rising off my mug. I remember my mom's eyes looking down at the table. I remember my brother-in-law smirking into his wine glass. "There is no way Mara is going to afford half of this place," Harper said, tossing her hair back. "I mean, let's be realistic. Some of us actually have careers." She laughed. My Aunt Linda laughed through the phone speaker, the little tinny sound filling the kitchen like a tiny bell of cruelty. "Mom, I think we need to just talk about this honestly," Harper said. "The cabin should stay with someone who can keep it up." My mom didn't say a word. She just nodded. That was the day I stopped trying to explain myself to my family. The cabin is called Pine Hollow. It sits at the end of a dirt road about an hour and a half outside the city, right on the edge of a lake my grandfather bought in 1962. There's a big wooden porch with a crooked swing my dad built when I was 7. There's a stone fireplace Dad and I laid together the summer I turned 12. There's a little blue bedroom with a cracked window I never fixed, because the sound of the wind coming through it is the sound of being safe. Every summer of my life, I spent August at Pine Hollow. Harper spent July. That's how it always worked. Harper got the good weeks because she was older, because she pushed, because she had a voice loud enough to bend the calendar around her. I never complained. I just took August. When our grandfather died 2 years ago, he left Pine Hollow to both of us in his will. 50-50. He wrote it on a yellow legal pad in his own hand the day before he passed. I was there. I watched the pen shake in his fingers. "Give it to both my girls," he said. "Let them share it." The will said we had 3 years to figure it out. Either we split it, or one of us buys the other one out. I knew, the day after the funeral, that it would have to be a buyout. Harper was never going to share anything nicely. She never has. Not the back bedroom in our old house. Not the car when we were teenagers. Not the last slice of cake at any birthday. I also knew I was the one who was going to have to come up with the money. I just didn't know how I was going to do it. 2 years passed. I watched Harper post pictures of Pine Hollow online. Big smile, white wine, the lake behind her, caption, "My place, my forever place." She started calling it the cabin I'm going to own. I didn't fight her, I just worked. 3 years ago, I had a tiny candle business. The kind where you melt soy wax in your kitchen at 2 in the morning and pray someone buys it on a Saturday. I called it Loomlight. The name came from a word my grandfather used for the way light comes through the trees at sunset. I sold candles at farmers markets. I sold candles at craft fairs. I sold candles out of the back of my car. Then I started selling online. Then I got my first wholesale account. Then I got a second. Then a third. I didn't tell anyone in my family. Not because I was hiding it. Because every time I tried to share anything good, Harper found a way to make it small. Morris is selling candles? She said to my mom, loud enough for me to hear from the next room. That's so cute. Cute is how she kills things. Cute means she doesn't think it matters. Cute means it's not a career, not a real job, not anything she has to take seriously. I stopped sharing my wins. I stopped defending my choices. I just kept going. By last winter, Loomlight was in 140 stores. Small shops mostly. Bookstores. Gift shops. A few hotel lobbies. I had on tiny team, 4 people. We worked out of a converted garage I rented behind a print shop. I was careful with the money. I didn't buy a nicer car. I didn't buy a nicer apartment. I didn't take big vacations. I saved every dollar I could. I had a reason. The deadline in the will was coming up. I needed to buy Harper out. But Harper thought she was going to buy me out. She had been saying it for over a year. Mom, I'm going to talk to my financial guy about the cabin, she said at Thanksgiving. Mom, I'm going to make an offer this spring, she said at Christmas. Mom, do you think Mara even understands what this property is worth? She said at Easter, right in front of me. I just smiled. I just kept eating my mashed potatoes. I think my mom thought I smiled because I agreed, but I was smiling because I had a different plan. In March, my grandfather's lawyer, Mr. Whitfield, called me. Your grandfather left instructions in a sealed letter, he said. In case you ever wanted to keep the cabin in the family, he set up something. I sat down. There is a fund, Mr. Whitfield said. He set it up 20 years ago. It's a quiet trust named after the lake. He put money into it every year since you were a little girl. The fund is meant to help the grandchild who actually loves the cabin. I was quiet for a long time. The fund can match whatever you bring, Mr. Whitfield said. If you come to the buyout with serious money, the trust adds the rest. The cabin stays in the family. It goes to the grandchild who proves they want it. I asked him if Harper knew. He said no. He said my grandfather designed it that way on purpose. He saw how things were going, Mr. Whitfield said. He didn't want her to know. He wanted you to have a real chance. I cried for a week after that phone call. Then I called my financial guy, my real one, the one I hired with my own money 2 years ago. I told him I wanted to be ready to make a full buyout offer by August. He said it would be tight. He said we could do it. I said do it. For the next 5 months, I worked harder than I have ever worked in my life. I poured every spare dollar into the account set up for the cabin. My financial guy used some of my business revenue. My grandfather's trust covered the rest. I stopped going out to dinner. I stopped buying new clothes. I stopped going on trips. I even stopped going to the dentist, which, looking back, was probably a mistake. I didn't tell a single person. Not my best friend Josie. Not my dad. Not anyone. I just kept working. Then April came, and Harper threw the first punch of the season. Mara, are you even saving for anything? She asked me at my mom's birthday dinner. I just want to understand your plan. Because I have a plan. I am saving, I said. I have a plan. Yeah, but a real plan, she said. A plan with real numbers. Harper, leave her alone, my dad said very quietly, almost under his breath. I saw it. Dad saw it. Dad has always seen it. But Dad has never stood up. Not once in my life has my dad stood up to Harper and not backed down 2 minutes later. This time, he didn't even fully stand up. He just mumbled. Then Harper kept going. Mom, I'm going to need you to back me on this one, she said. I have the income. I have the husband who can co-sign. I have the plan. My mother looked at me. Then she looked at Harper. Mara, honey, you know we love you, she said. But maybe Harper is right. Maybe it's just practical. Practical? I said. Maybe, she said. Maybe it makes more sense. Mom, I said I have a plan. I can compete with Harper. I want to compete. Of course you do, sweetie, she said. She said it like I was 6. I left the dinner early. In the car, I called Josie and cried. You have to fight this, Josie said. You have to go in there and tell them the truth. Not yet, I said. Why not? Because I want them to see it, I said. I want Harper to see the contract. I want my mom to read the name. I want my dad to look at me like I'm a real person for maybe the first time in my life. Josie was quiet. That's dark, she said. That's the only way I know how to do this, I said. If I tell them now, Harper will find a way to spin it. She'll say my business is a hobby. She'll say my numbers are too small. She'll say my husband, which I don't even have, can't co-sign. So you're going to let her keep talking. I'm going to let her keep talking, I said, until August. Then Harper started posting more. She started tagging our mom in photos of the cabin with captions like future owner and legacy stays in the right hands. She invited her friends up for the 4th of July. She didn't invite me. She brought her mother-in-law up for a weekend. She didn't invite me. She even had my mom and dad up for a long weekend in May and took pictures of the two of them on the porch. Posts captioned the cabin my parents will always have, in the family that deserves it. I saw the posts. I didn't comment. I didn't like them. I didn't text her. I just kept saving. In June, my financial guy called. "We're in position," he said, "whenever you're ready." "Thank you," I said. "Are you sure you want to do this the way you're doing it?" he asked. "You could just tell them." "No," I said. "I want the moment." Then July came, and the family group chat exploded. "Okay, so we need to set a date to sign," Harper wrote. "My attorney has the paperwork. We'll do it at the cabin. End of July. Everyone is invited. Mom, Dad, please come. This is going to be a really special moment for our family." Special moment for our family. I read that line 3 times. I almost laughed out loud. Then I texted Josie. "It's happening," I said. "What day?" she asked. "The 28th, I said. "What are you wearing?" she asked. "I don't know yet," I said. "Something quiet. Something I've had in my closet for 2 years. Something she would never notice." "You're terrifying," she said. "Thank you," I said. The day before the signing, I drove up to Pine Hollow by myself. I sat on the porch. The wind was coming through that little cracked blue bedroom window, exactly the way it always does. I sat there for a long time. I thought about my grandfather. I thought about his yellow legal pad. I thought about the trust he made so I would have a real chance. I thought about all the years I smiled through Harper's jabs. I thought about all the cabbage I ate when I should have gone to a real restaurant. I thought about every candle I waxed at 2 in the morning. I promised my grandfather, sitting on that porch, that I was going to win this one the right way. I promised I wasn't going to throw it in Harper's face. I promised I was going to be calm. Then I drove home. The next morning, I picked up the phone and called Mr. Whitfield. "Is everything ready?" I asked. "Yes," he said, "on my end." "Is the contract finalized?" "Yes." "Does my name go on the top line?" "It does." "Thank you," I said. "I'll see you at the cabin." "See you there, Mara." I hung up. I looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't put on any makeup. I put on a clean pair of jeans and a white t-shirt my grandfather liked. I drove to Pine Hollow. I got there an hour before everyone else. I parked my car on the far side of the cabin, where Harper never looks, in the little gravel spot behind the woodpile, the one I used to park in when I was 15 and didn't want to be seen. I sat on the porch. I waited. The first to arrive was Harper. She stepped out of her Range Rover in a long cream dress and gold sandals and sunglasses that probably cost more than my first year's rent. "Mara," she called out, "you are here early." "I wanted some time with the cabin," I said. "That's sweet," she said. "Enjoy your last morning here." I just smiled. Last morning. My mom and dad arrived next. Mom was wearing Harper's favorite color on her, a soft blue. Dad gave me a small hug. "You okay?" he whispered. "I'm okay, Dad." "We'll see what happens," he said. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Just, he said. "Whatever it is. We'll see." I nodded. Then my Aunt Linda pulled up in my cousin's car. Then Harper's husband, Kyle, arrived in a separate car. Then Mr. Whitfield, the lawyer, arrived last. He carried a brown leather folder. He shook my father's hand. He nodded at my mother. He barely looked at Harper. "Morning, Counselor," Harper said, too loud, too confident. "Morning," Mr. Whitfield said. We all moved into the big living room. There was a long table set up. My mother had put out coffee and a plate of lemon bars, the way she always does when something important is happening. Harper sat at the head of the table. I sat at the other end. Mr. Whitfield sat in the middle. He opened the folder. He cleared his throat. "As most of you know," he began, "this property was left in joint tenancy to 2 grandchildren. Under the terms of the will, a buyout was to occur within 3 years. Today is the final day." Harper smiled at me. A tight smile, a bless-your-heart smile. "Mara, honey, I'm sorry it has to be this way." The way she always smiled when she was about to take something from me. "Both parties had the right to submit a buyout proposal," Mr. Whitfield continued. "Both parties did, in fact, submit proposals. The trust authorized to facilitate this transaction has reviewed them." He paused. "The trust was established by the late Mr. Aldridge Pine 20 years ago. Its sole purpose is to ensure this property stays in the family. Its condition for releasing funds is simple. The grandchild who can demonstrate the longest, most consistent commitment to this property, financially and personally, will be supported by the trust in a full buyout." My mother's head turned slowly. My father's hands tightened on the edge of the table. Harper's smile faded just slightly. "The trust reviewed both proposals," Mr. Whitfield said. It reviewed 5 years of financial records, business filings, and personal correspondence from both parties. He pulled out a single sheet of paper. "This is the final contract," he said. He placed it on the table. "Top line," he said. "The buyout buyer of record is," and he slid the paper across the table. The room went silent. Harper leaned forward. Her eyes dropped to the top of the page. I saw her lips move like she was reading the name out loud to herself, but no sound came out. Then she looked up at me. Her face changed. The creamy, smug, golden child look on her face collapsed. She looked at my mother. She looked at my father. She looked back at me. Mr. Whitfield said, very calmly, "The contract is signed. The buyout is complete. Pine Hollow now belongs in full and free of any co-ownership, too." And he stopped. He looked at me. The room held its breath. I just took a sip of my coffee. And I said, very quietly, the only thing I have ever wanted to say in front of this family. "Okay, that's it." I just said, "Okay." Mr. Whitfield nodded. "Congratulations, Mara," he said. Nobody else spoke. My mother put her hand over her mouth. My father stood up slowly. Harper didn't move. Kyle looked down at the table. Aunt Linda, on FaceTime, started crying. And the wind came through the little blue bedroom window exactly the way it always does, the way it has been doing since I was 7 years old. The cabin was mine, but the story isn't over, because Harper started to stand up, and she did not look happy. She did not look ready to accept this quietly, and my mother, for the first time in my life, did not know whose hand to hold. Harper pushed her chair back, not loudly, not dramatically, just a slow scrape across the old wooden floor. She stood up. She pressed both palms flat on the table. She looked at Mr. Whitfield like she was going to make him take it back. "Excuse me," she said. "What do you mean this is done?" "That's exactly what I mean," Mr. Whitfield said. He didn't flinch. "I have known Mr. Whitfield since I was 9 years old. He has never flinched. This contract was reviewed by 2 separate legal teams," he said. "It was deposited with the county yesterday afternoon. It is filed. It is final." "Deposited by who?" Harper asked. "By the buyout party of record." "Which is my sister," Kyle said, half laughing, like this was a typo that someone could fix. "Yes," Mr. Whitfield said. "Mara doesn't have Harper," Mr. Whitfield said. "I suggest you sit down." "I will not sit down," she said. "I want my attorney to see this paperwork before anyone signs anything else." "The paperwork is signed," Mr. Whitfield said. "I'll say it one more time so the room is clear. The paperwork is signed. The deed transferred into Mara's name as of 4:42 yesterday afternoon. She owns Pine Hollow. You do not." Harper turned to me. "Mara," she said, "tell me you didn't do this." "I did it," I said. "How?" "The same way you were going to do it," I said. "I just did it first. And I did it bigger. I didn't mean for it to come out that way. But it was true." She stared at me. Her eyes moved over the white t-shirt, over the clean pair of jeans, over the sneakers I have owned for 3 years. She was trying to figure out where I got the money. She was trying to figure out who helped me. She was trying to find a crack. She was trying to find a way out of it. "Mom," Harper said, turning around, "tell her this isn't right." My mother didn't answer. "Mom," Harper said again, sharper. "Harper, honey, sit down," my mother said. "Let Mr. Whitfield finish." "I don't need to finish," Mr. Whitfield said. "There's nothing more to read. There's nothing more to argue. The trust did what your grandfather asked it to do. He created it 20 years ago because he saw exactly the kind of situation that would happen today." He looked at my mother. "He created it for Mara," he said, "and only Mara." My mother closed her eyes. "My father never told me that," she said. "Your father told you what he wanted you to hear," Mr. Whitfield said. "He told Harper what he wanted Harper to hear. He told Mara what he wanted Mara to hear. And he left the truth in a sealed letter with me." I sat very still. I didn't want to cry yet. I wanted to hear her try. I wanted to see her swinging at air. Harper turned back to me. "What did you sell?" she asked, like this was a charity bake sale. "What business gave you this kind of money?" "I built a business," I said. "You build candles," she said. "I built a business," I said again. "What business?" "The kind you stopped asking about 2 years ago." She blinked. I watched her try to remember. "You mean the little Etsy page you had?" she asked. "The business that ended up in 140 retail locations by the end of last year," I said. "The business that grossed just under $2 million in the last fiscal year. The business I own outright in my name with no co-founder and no investor. The business that paid for the buyout." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't yell. I just said it. I said it like I was telling her the weather. Kyle put his hand on Harper's shoulder. She shrugged it off. "Those numbers aren't real," she said. "They are audited," I said. "Mr. Whitfield has them." Mr. Whitfield nodded. "They are audited and notarized," he said. They were submitted to the trust as part of Mara's proposal. Harper looked at him. She looked at my father. She looked at my mother. Then she looked at Aunt Linda on the phone. Linda didn't say a word. She just sat there. Linda, who used to say Harper is the one with the real future. Linda, who used to say Mara is the sweet one. Sweet, there's that word. Sweet is another way to kill something. Mara, my mother said very softly, did you do this on purpose? Yes, I said. How long have you been planning this? 2 years, I said. 2 years, she repeated. Yes. And you didn't tell me. No, why not? Because if I told you, Mom, you would have told Harper. The room went quiet. My mother opened her mouth. Then she closed it. She didn't deny it. She knew. We all knew. We have always known. Mara, my dad said. I turned to him. Dad, I'm proud of you, he said. It was the first time in my life he ever said that to me. In front of another person. He said it quietly. He said it without looking around to see who was watching. He said it to me. Thank you, Dad, I said. I held his hand across the table for a second. Then I let go. Harper sat back down. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. You could see it in her face. You could see the math happening behind her eyes. If Mara made $2 million a year in candles, how long has Mara been making $2 million a year in candles? If Mara paid cash for the buyout, how much cash did Mara have? If Mara was the one my grandfather quietly set up a trust for, what did my grandfather think about Harper? Harper's chest rose and fell. Kyle finally spoke. I think we should all take a breath, he said. I think we should, Mr. Whitfield said. He closed the folder. He placed it in front of me. This is yours, Mara, he said. So is the cabin. So is the trust letter. So are the keys your grandfather left behind. He handed me a small brass key on a thin leather string, the key to the original lock on the screen door. The original lock my grandfather installed in 1962. I held it in my palm. It was warm from being in his pocket. Thank you, I whispered. You're welcome, honey, Mr. Whitfield said. Your grandfather said to tell you the swing is yours too. I almost broke, then I didn't. I just held the key. I held it and I felt my grandfather's hand over mine the way it used to feel when we walked to the lake in the morning. Then Aunt Linda finally spoke. Mara, she said from the phone, I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything, Aunt Linda, I said. I do, she said. I should have stuck up for you. I should have said something when Harper called your business cute. Yeah, I said. You should have. She started crying again. I didn't comfort her. I just let her cry. Then my mother spoke. Mara, I want to say something, she said. Okay, Mom, I didn't think you could do it, she said. I'm telling you the truth because that's what you deserve. I thought your sister was going to win. I thought you were going to lose the place. I thought it was already decided. I nodded. I thought wrong, she said. You did. I'm sorry, I know, Mom. I'm so sorry, I know. She put her face in her hands. My dad put his arm around her. I didn't go to her. Not yet. I knew I would. But not yet. Let her sit in it. Let her understand what she did. Then Harper spoke. Mara, what do you want from me? She asked. I want you to leave, I said. What? I want you to drive back down the mountain, I said. I want you to take your attorney and your co-signing husband and your cream dress and your gold sandals, and I want you to drive back down the mountain. I want to sit on this porch with Mom and Dad and Aunt Linda for 1 hour, by myself, with my family. The way it should have been every August of my life. She stared at me. You can't kick me out of my own grandfather's cabin, she said. It's not your grandfather's cabin, I said. It's mine. And you've been told that in writing by a lawyer and by the man who read my grandfather's will. She stood up. Kyle stood up with her. They walked toward the door. At the door, she stopped. Mara, she said. What? I didn't think you had it in you. I know, I said. You should have told me. No, Harper, I shouldn't have. Why not? Because if I told you, you would have tried to stop it. You would have called Mr. Whitfield. You would have called your own attorney. You would have tried to get Dad on the phone. You would have done anything you could to prevent this. And that was the one thing I was not going to let happen. She stood there for a second. This isn't over, she said. It is, Harper. It's very over. She left. Kyle followed. The door closed. The screen door banged softly behind them, the old way, the way it has banged for 63 years. Then it was just the four of us, me, Mom, Dad, Aunt Linda on the phone. The lemon bars nobody was eating, the coffee nobody was drinking. I sat on the porch. Mom and Dad sat next to me. Aunt Linda stayed on the phone. We didn't talk for a long time. We just sat there. The wind came through the little blue bedroom window. Mom, I said finally. Yes, baby, this is my porch. I know, she said. This is my swing. I know. This is my lake. I know. I love you, Mom. I love you too, Mara. Are you proud of me? She started to cry. Baby, I have been proud of you for many years, she said. I just didn't know how to say it in front of her. You can say it now, I said. I'm proud of you, she whispered. My dad squeezed my shoulder, then he said, I'm going to fix that cracked window for you this week. I laughed. It was the first real laugh I had laughed in years. Okay, Dad, I said. He smiled. He had the smallest smile. The smallest, sweetest smile. The smile he used to have before Harper learned how to take up all the space in the room. That afternoon, I made everybody lunch. Sandwiches, the simple kind, turkey and cheese. Chips in a bowl, lemonade. I set it up on the porch. I put on the old radio. I let the wind do what it always does. Mom asked if I was lonely up here in August. I told her I wasn't lonely. I told her I just liked August. I told her I always liked August. She nodded. She didn't fight me. She knew. For the first time in a long time, she just knew. Before they left, my dad held my hand. Mara, he said. Dad, when did you know? Know what? That you were going to be okay. Since I was 12 years old, I said. Since you and I built the fireplace together. He looked at me. His eyes got wet. He nodded. He walked to the car. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. That night, after everyone left, I sat on the porch alone. I held the brass key in my hand. I opened the screen door. It creaked. I went inside. I walked into the little blue bedroom. I looked at the cracked window. I didn't fix it. I promised my dad I would let him fix it. I lay down on the twin bed, the bed I slept in when I was 8, the bed I used to think was too small for me. It still fits me perfectly. I lay there. The wind came through. I closed my eyes. I thought about my grandfather. I thought about his legal pad. I thought about his shaking hand. I thought about the trust he built for 20 years. I thought about how every single year of his life since I was a little girl, he put money into something so I would have a chance. I thought about the letters he wrote me at camp. I thought about the letters I still have in a shoebox in my apartment. I thought about the way he used to say, "Be patient, Mara. Good things take time," I cried. I cried for a long time, the good kind. The deep, quiet, behind the sternum kind. The kind of cry that has been waiting for you to be ready. Then I stopped. I picked up my phone. I called Josie. "It's done," I said. "How do you feel?" "Like I'm 8 years old again." "Are you happy?" "I'm happy, Jojo." "Good. Do you know what I did first?"
What?
"I made turkey sandwiches for my mom and dad." "Mara!" "Yeah. That's the most you thing you could possibly do. I know. You're ridiculous. I know. I love you. I love you too." We hung up. I put the phone down. I lay back down. The wind came through again. And, for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Asterisk epilogue 6 months later, the cabin was fully restored. My dad and I replaced the porch boards. We rebuilt the right side of the railing. We restained every beam. My mom came up to help in May. Harper didn't come. Kyle didn't come. Aunt Linda started calling to check on me. I let her. I didn't hold it against her anymore. Loomlight grew that year. By the end of the next fiscal year, we were in 207 stores. I hired my 4th full-time employee. I gave her health insurance on day 1. I paid her more than the market rate because she had 2 little kids and I had been a kid once and I knew what it felt like when nobody paid attention to whether you ate lunch. I renamed one of our candles Pine Hollow. I didn't tell anyone in my family. They found it on a shelf in a gift shop in the city. My mom sent me a text. "This is yours, isn't it?" she said. "Yes, Mom," I said. "It's beautiful," she said. "Thank you. We left it there. We didn't need to make a big deal out of it. Some things just say themselves." I still drive up to Pine Hollow in August. I still park behind the woodpile. I still sit on the porch. The cracked blue window is fixed now. Dad fixed it. The wind still comes through. But now it comes through a brand new pane of glass. The glass is clear. The air is the same. And every August, when I sit here, my grandfather's little brass key sits on the table next to my coffee. I don't need to hold it. I just need to know it's there. I think if he were alive, he would say the same thing he used to say every time I walked out onto the porch with him. "Sit down, Mara. Sit down." The good stuff takes time, and the good stuff did. It just took 20 years, and one quiet, patient, candlelit August at a time. Story 6. My family ignored me at Thanksgiving, until the judge asked me to stand beside him. I have a theory that every family keeps one member who is supposed to disappear quietly, and at my mother's Thanksgiving table that year, I was that member. The terrible part is, I had spent 34 years getting very good at it. The house on Maplewood Drive smelled like sage and burned sugar when I walked in. Same green carpet, same china cabinet, same kitchen clock that ran 10 minutes fast so nobody in our family was ever late except me. I carried the pie in both hands, the one with the lattice crust that took me 2 hours, because my mother's pie was her identity, and I was still, against every piece of evidence, trying to earn a seat at her table. Karen Price looked up from the stove and smiled at me the way you smile at a stranger who is holding your mail. "Rachel," she said, "you made it." "I made the pie," I said. "How nice." She took it from me, set it on the counter beside the store-bought one, and there it was, the whole story of my life in one small gesture. 34 years old, an attorney who spent her days pulling money back from people who stole from the elderly, and my mother had placed my homemade pie next to a cardboard pie and chosen the cardboard pie. The living room was full of people I shared blood with and nothing else. My father, Walt Price, sat in his recliner with the football game on and his back to the doorway. My older brother Dylan held court by the fireplace, one hand in his pocket, telling a story about a waterfront property he was about to close on, and his wife Courtney laughed at everything he said like she had to hit a quota. And my sister Megan, sweet Megan, was the only one who stood up when I came in. "Hey, Rach," she says, and hugged me hard enough to creak my ribs. "I saved you a seat by me." "At the kids' table?" "At the kids' table," she said, and I watched her wince. Mom said it was, quote, casual seating. You know how she gets. I knew exactly how she got. The kids' table was a folding card table shoved against the wall beneath the coat rack, and I was 34 years old with a Juris Doctor and a bar card in my wallet, and I sat down at the card table between my cousin's 9-year-old and a bowl of cranberry sauce that still had the shape of the can printed on its side. Not one adult said a word about it. That was the thing about my family. They were never cruel to me in a way you could point at, they were just absent. The conversation flowed over my head like a river over a rock. Dylan's development company, Price Development Group, had just broken ground on a retirement community out in Dublin, and for 15 minutes that was the only subject that existed. My father, who had barely grunted at me, leaned forward and asked Dylan about the financing, like Dylan was the president of something important. My mother kept touching Dylan's arm. Courtney laughed at the part where Dylan mentioned the size of his office. "God," Megan whispered to me, "did you have to pick such a loud seat to be invisible?" "I'm aiming for invisible," I said. "It's going well." From the corner of the room, in the good armchair that was hers and hers alone, Grandma Jean watched all of us. Grandma Jean Whitmore was 84, sharp as a winter sidewalk, and the only adult in that house who had ever looked at me like I was a person instead of a disappointment. She crooked her finger at me, and I went over and knelt beside her chair so she didn't have to strain her neck. "You look thin, Rachel," she said. "I'm fine, Grandma. That brother of yours is going to lie to this family tonight." She said it quietly, calmly, the way she used to tell me the weather. "You'll see. And when he does, you remember that the truth has a long memory." She patted my hand. "Now go sit down before your mother starts fussing that I'm hogging you." I didn't know what to make of that, so I filed it away the way I filed away everything Grandma said, because she was never wrong twice about the same person. Dinner was served at 4. My mother carved the turkey and handed plates down the line, and when she got to me, she set my plate down without looking at me, like I was a shelf she was stocking. I thought about the case I had closed that week, the one where I spent 6 months unwinding a reverse mortgage scam that had taken a widow's house on the east side, and I thought about how the only thing my mother knew about my job was that I worked for the state and did not make money. My brother made more in one closing than I made in a year, my mother liked to say. She said it into the air, never to me, like a fact about the weather. Nobody at that table knew that the widow's house I had saved was going to be sold at a loss, and that I had sat with the widow at the closing and held her hand, and that it was the best day of my month. "Rachel still chasing old folks' refunds?" Courtney asked across the table, bright and sweet, and Dylan laughed with his mouth full. "She fights the good fight," Dylan said, "one refund at a time." I smiled and said nothing, which is what they wanted, and Megan kicked me under the table because she knew I was doing math about how much money I could make if I walked away from my principles the way I had done every Thanksgiving since law school. The trouble started at dessert, and it started, of course, with Dylan. He came over to the card table with his plate in his hand and leaned down, lowering his voice to the tone he used when he wanted something, a tone I knew better than anyone in that room. "Hey, Rach," he said, "you got a couple of minutes tonight? There's something I want to talk to you about." "About what?" "Business," he said. "Not here. Kitchen after." I looked at him. Dylan Price was 41, tall, handsome, in the way that made strangers hand him their savings, and he had not asked me anything personal in 6 years. He had not asked about my cases, my apartment, my life. He wanted something, and I already felt the familiar cold settling in my stomach, the one that showed up every time my family remembered I existed. "Fine," I said. "Kitchen after." The kitchen after was lit by one dim bulb over the sink and the cold blue of the porch light. Dylan closed the door behind us and stood with his arms crossed, and for a second he looked like our father, same stubborn jaw, same way of filling a doorway like he owned the building. So he said, "I need a favor." I figured. "It's small. It's nothing, honestly." He smiled, and I knew that smile. It was the smile he used on lenders. "You work for the Attorney General's office. Consumer protection, elder fraud, all that." "I know what I do, Dylan. Right. So you sit in the same building as the prosecutors, and you see files, and you hear things." He spread his hands. "There's a client of mine, an older gentleman named Carl Mercer. He's had some trouble with a bank down in Cincinnati, and there's a grand jury looking at a deal we did together. I just need to know if the name Price has come up." "That's it? You tell me what you hear, and I handle the rest. The words sat in the air between us for a long moment. I could feel my pulse in my throat. I had spent 8 years building a reputation as the person you could hand a case file with a dying person's life inside it, and my brother was standing in my mother's kitchen asking me to become a mole. No, I said. Rachel, it's just information. It's obstruction, I said. It's a conflict, it's witness tampering adjacent, and if I so much as look at that grand jury docket, I could lose my license and go to prison. I took a breath. And beyond all of that, Dylan, you're asking me to help you hide something, and you know it. His face changed. The salesman's smile went away, and underneath it was something I had seen on our father's face too, a red, flat anger. So that's it, he said. Little Rachel, too good for her own family. I'm not too good, Dylan. I'm a lawyer. You're a paper pusher, he said. You chase old people's refunds and you call yourself a crusader. I built something. I employ 40 people, and my own sister won't have a conversation with me. I just did, I said. The answer is no. He laughed, one sharp laugh, and shook his head like I had told him a joke he would repeat later to his friends. Fine, he said. Fine, I'll remember this. I walked out of that kitchen with my hands shaking, and I made it to the front hall before I heard my mother's voice behind me, cold and quiet. Dylan said you two had words. She wasn't asking. He said you accused him of something. I didn't accuse him of anything, Mom. He asked me to spy on a case for him, and I said no. Oh, Rachel. She said my name the way other people say the word unfortunately. He's your brother. He's providing for this family. The least you could do is not make a scene at Thanksgiving. I did not make a scene, I said. I did not even raise my voice. But she was already walking away, back toward the living room where my father was laughing at something Dylan had said. And I stood in the hallway with my coat in my hands and understood, with the particular clarity of 34 years of practice, that whatever Dylan told them next, they would believe it. I left before the pie was cut. Megan caught me at the door. Rach, wait. She had her coat half on, shivering. What happened? Mom is in the kitchen saying you accused Dylan of being a crook. I asked him to stop doing something illegal. I paused. Actually, I asked him once, and then he asked me to help him cover it up, and I said no. That's the whole story. Megan looked past me at the house, and I watched her sort through it. She was the only one in that family who ever tried to sort through anything. Okay, she said. Okay, I believe you. You know I believe you. Thank you. You want me to come over? We can watch a movie. I'll bring the good pie. Megan, you should go back inside. It's Thanksgiving. I hugged her and held on 1 second longer than normal. I'll call you tomorrow. I drove home with the heater on full and the radio off. The streets of Columbus were almost empty. Everyone else already safe inside a house that loved them, and I sat at a red light on Fifth Avenue and cried for exactly 40 seconds, the way I had trained myself to do since I was a kid. Because crying longer than that gave you a headache, and my family never once asked what the headache was from. When I got to my apartment, I checked my phone. Nothing from anyone with my last name, which was not a surprise. I made tea and sat with it and tried to feel that I had done the right thing, and I mostly did, and then the group chat lit up at 11:41 at night. The family chat was called Price Family Stuff, which I had always hated, and the message on top was from my father. Walt Price, Rachel, Dylan told us what happened. We are all very disappointed in you. Some things are more important than your job, and family is one of them. You should be ashamed. We will not be discussing this further at Christmas. I stared at the screen until the words went blurry. Dylan had not told them what happened, of course. He had told them a version, and the version had won, because the version always won when the storyteller was the one they loved. Megan sent me a private message at 11:50. I am so sorry, Rach. I know you. I know what you did. This is not how our family story ends. I promise. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe it more than I had wanted anything in a long time. But my father's words were still on my screen, and my mother had chosen a cardboard pie, and I had a very strong feeling that the story was only getting started. I was right about that. 2 weeks later, Grandma Jean called me on a Tuesday night, and her voice was quiet in a way I had never heard it quiet before. Rachel, she said, could you come over, sweetheart? I need you to look at some paperwork for me. I think your brother has been stealing from me, and I want to be sure before I do anything about it. I sat down on my kitchen floor while she talked. I did not get up for a long time. The truth has a long memory, she had said at Thanksgiving. I just never imagined she meant both of us. Grandma's apartment smelled like her, like lavender sachets and old books, and the lemon cookies she made, even though her doctor told her to cut back on sugar. She had the papers spread out on her kitchen table in 4 neat stacks, and she had labeled each stack with a sticky note in her careful handwriting. Account statement, POA documents, my letters to the bank, his letters pretending to be me. She was wearing her good cardigan, the navy one she only wore to church, and I knew before she said a word that this was not a confused old woman calling her granddaughter for help. This was a woman who had been waiting for the right moment to act. Grandma, I said, sitting down across from her, did Dad and Mom know about any of this? Your father knows that Dylan needed help with his finances a few years ago. I gave Dylan power of attorney so he could manage my accounts, and I put a monthly allowance in it for him because he asked and because he said the development company was going through a rough patch. She said it without bitterness. I did it on purpose, Rachel. I wanted to see what he would do. My stomach dropped. You wanted to see what he would do. I had a feeling about him for years. A feeling is not evidence, and I am a woman who likes evidence. She pushed the first stack toward me. Every withdrawal he made from my accounts, I kept my own record of it. Every time he asked me to sign something, I kept a copy. I called the bank's fraud department the week after he took the first big sum, and I told them to flag the account. They called me back and said it was a family matter and they could not do anything without proof of incapacity, and I told them I would get them proof my own way. She tapped the second stack. These are the letters where he wrote to them pretending to be confused, to make me look incompetent. He wanted a paper trail showing I was losing my mind so that when this ever came out, he could say I gave him everything willingly because I did not know what I was doing. I had to put my hands flat on the table to steady myself. 34 years old, a lawyer who had seen every kind of cruelty that people could do to old people, and my own grandmother had been living inside one of my case files for 2 years, and I had not seen it because I never looked at my own family the way I looked at strangers. Grandma, how much? $400,000, give or take, she said, like she was reading off a grocery list. Some of it is in his company account. Some of it is gone. I am not going to get it all back, and I know that. What I want is for him to be stopped before he does it to somebody else. He is doing it to somebody else right now, Rachel. He is doing it to the people in that retirement community he is building, and to an older gentleman named Carl Mercer, and to a neighbor of mine, Cora Brody, who is 81 and who signed over her house because Dylan told her it would protect her from taxes. I remembered the case file on my desk at work, the one I had been assigned the week before, the one with the unassuming name, Consumer Protection Division, Inquiry Number 4811, regarding certain financial instruments sold to elderly clients of Price Development Group. I had not opened it yet. I had been avoiding it the way you avoid a letter you know is going to change your life, because when I saw the name on the file, I had closed my eyes and put it at the bottom of the stack and pretended my week was normal. Grandma, I said, and my voice came out small. I think I already have a file with Dylan's name on it. At my office. I think it has been sitting in my inbox for 8 days. Grandma Jean reached across the table and took my hand. Her hand was warm and completely steady. Then you know what you have to do, sweetheart. I have to turn my own brother in. You have to do your job, she said. That is what the job is for. People like me, we are supposed to be invisible, and then we are supposed to be grateful. And when somebody steals from us, we are supposed to be too embarrassed to tell anyone. I am not embarrassed. I am angry and I am clear-headed, and I want you to go to your office tomorrow and open that file and do what you would do if the name on it was a stranger's. I cried then, the ugly kind of crying, the kind that came with snot and shaking, and Grandma Jean just held my hand and let me do it. The way she had let me do it when I was 9 years old, and my mother had told me I was too sensitive for this family. This is going to break Mom and Dad, I said. They have a right to be broken, she said. That is not your burden to carry. You did not take the money, Rachel. You are the one holding the lantern, and I will not let you pretend it is a sin to hold a lantern. I went to work the next morning and I opened the file and I read it all the way through and then I read it again. 7 names. 7 elderly clients of Price Development Group. All of them sold the same story about guaranteed income funds that did not exist. All of them told to sign the same documents. All of them pointing back to the same 2 signatures on the same company letterhead. Dylan Price. Carl Mercer. I had a choice to make, and I knew that if I made the wrong one, I would never be able to look at myself in a mirror again. I closed the file, I walked down the hall to my supervisor's office, and I knocked on Denise Alvarez's door. Denise was a tiny woman with huge glasses and a voice like a judge, and she had been my boss for 6 years. She listened to the whole thing without interrupting, which was how I knew it was bad, because Denise always interrupted when she wanted to soften something. Okay, she said when I finished. First thing we do is you stop touching this file. Right now, today. You are conflicted out, Rachel, and that is not a punishment. That is the rules doing their job. Second thing, you write me a memo of everything you have seen and everything your grandmother told you, and you sign it, and we hand it to the prosecutor's office exactly the way we would with any citizen complaint. Third thing, you call your brother's office and you tell him nothing except that there is a matter he should have an attorney for. She took her glasses off and looked at me. The hardest part of this job, and I have told you this before, is that sometimes the victim and the perpetrator have the same last name as you. You are doing the right thing. The right thing is going to feel like the wrong thing for about a year. Then it starts to feel like sleep. I wrote the memo, I signed it, I handed it to Naomi Carter, the prosecutor from the Elder Justice Unit, a tall woman with a braid down her back and the patience of a cat, and Naomi read the memo sitting in the armchair in Denise's office, and when she finished, she looked up at me and said, "You are sure about this?" "I am sure about the paperwork," I said. "The paperwork is exactly what it is. My grandmother kept records and the file matches and it is not a coincidence." Naomi nodded once. "Then we will do our job and you stay out of it. If they come after you for a family vendetta, I want your hands clean so there is nothing to find. You people at the AG office are the ones who catch things. Let us be the ones who swing the hammer." The next week was the strangest week of my life. I went to work and did my normal cases and came home and sat on my couch and waited for the phone to ring, and every time it rang, I flinched. I called Grandma Jean every night and she answered every time, and we did not talk about Dylan. We talked about her lemon cookies and the birds at her feeder and the novel she was reading, and it was the most honest conversation I had with anyone in that stretch because it was the only one that did not have a bomb in the middle of it. Megan called me on the Friday before Christmas, and I knew from the sound of her voice that it was over. "Rach," she said, and she was crying. "Rach, they arrested Dylan at his office party. There were police, Rach, in front of his whole company." Mom called me screaming. "She said you did this. She said you told the police about Grandma's money, and you ruined his life, and Dad is in the basement, and he will not come out." I sat down on my kitchen floor again, because my kitchen floor was becoming a place I lived. "Megan, I did not call the police. I filed a consumer complaint, and the prosecutor chose to pursue it. That is how the system works. And Dylan did take the money. Dylan took Grandma's money and Cora Brody's money and 5 other people's money, and I have seen the records." "I know," Megan whispered. "I know, Rach. I looked at the paperwork she gave me. I found it in the top drawer of her dresser. She left it out for me. I believe you. But Mom and Dad do not believe anything except what Dylan told them. And Dylan is telling them you have been jealous of him since we were kids, and you used your government job to destroy him." "He can tell them whatever he wants," I said. "The jury will see the records." "There is not going to be a jury if Mom gets her way. She is calling everyone she knows to get him a lawyer. She already found one, a man named Preston Blake. From Cleveland, she says he is the best there is. I had heard of Preston Blake. Everyone in my line of work had heard of Preston Blake. He was the kind of defense attorney who did not win on the facts, he won on the weariness of the jury, and he had a reputation for making elderly witnesses look confused on the stand, and I felt the cold settle in my stomach all over again because I knew my grandmother was going to be the state's key witness, and I knew what Preston Blake did to elderly women on the stand. "Megan," I said, "who is going to be with Grandma when she testifies?" There was a pause, and then Megan said quietly, like she was embarrassed to admit it, "Nobody, Rach. Mom said she cannot be in the same room as the person who took her son away. Dad will not leave the basement. I cannot take off work. I have finals." She was a graduate student then, working nights at a bookstore, and her voice cracked. "It has to be you. You know it has to be you." I thought about my mother's voicemail from that morning, the one I had listened to 3 times, the one where she told me I was dead to her. I thought about my father's text, the one that said I had always been a disappointment, and now the whole family knew it. I thought about sitting in a courtroom full of people who hated me, across the aisle from the brother I had reported, with my grandmother on the stand and a hired gun coming for her. Okay, I said. I will be there. Thank you, Megan said, and she started crying again. And I sat on my kitchen floor with the phone against my ear and thought about how strange it was that the person I was doing this for was the only person in my family who had never once asked me to be anyone other than who I was. The trial was set for April. I did not tell anyone in my office I was going. I took personal days and I told Denise I was visiting family, and she looked at me for a long moment and said, "You know I would come with you if you asked." "I know," I said. "But it is her show and I am just the one who holds her coat." "Then hold her coat," Denise said. "That is not nothing." The trial was set for the second week of April, and the courthouse in downtown Columbus was ice cold even though spring was poking through the sidewalks outside. I picked Grandma up at 7 in the morning, and she came out of her building wearing the navy cardigan and holding a brown paper bag of lemon cookies. "These are for after," she said. "Winning makes me hungry." The courtroom had high ceilings and wooden benches that creaked, and the air smelled like floor wax and old paper. The prosecution sat on the left. Naomi Carter was already there, her braid down her back, her file stacked on the table like a small fortress. The defense table on the right was empty, and I watched the door and I felt the familiar cold settle in me when I saw Dylan walk in behind a tall man in an expensive gray suit, silver-haired, with the kind of face that belonged on a billboard for a country bank. Preston Blake. He looked at us the way you look at a stain you plan to clean later. Behind them came my mother. Karen Price walked down the aisle with her chin up and her purse held tight, and she took a seat on the defense side without looking at us, and I knew she had not looked at me on purpose, because my mother planned every look she gave me like it was a line in a play she was directing. My father came in behind her, gray-faced, and sat beside her, and Courtney came last and sat on the far end with her phone in her hand, texting somebody. Then the door opened and Megan walked in. She saw us and she crossed the aisle, and she sat down beside me and took my hand, and across the room I heard my mother's breath hitch like Megan had struck her. "You should not have done that," I whispered. "I should have done it at Thanksgiving," Megan said. "You are the one person in this family who never once lied to me, Rach. I am sitting with the truth today." The bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Harold Whitfield took the bench. He was an older black man with sifter's glasses and a voice that carried like a bell, and he moved through the preliminaries the way you move through weather, without hurry. Naomi Carter opened for the state. She told the jury about 7 elderly people who had been sold a dream and handed a bill, about a company called Price Development Group that promised guaranteed income funds, about documents signed in good faith and accounts emptied in quiet weeks. And she told them about a granddaughter who walked into her office with a file and did not look away. She said the name Dylan Price and pointed at him, and I watched my mother's hands go white on her purse. The first witness was Carl Mercer. He was 59, bald, with the direct calm of a man who had already made his peace with the deal he had struck, and he had agreed to testify in exchange for a lesser sentence. He walked the jury through the scheme the way a teacher walks a class through a lesson. The fake funds, the marketing materials with these smiling older couples, the closing room where Dylan did all the talking and the new clients did all the nodding. He described the documents in the file, the ones I had read in my office with my hands shaking, and he said the words I had known were coming, that the idea for the retirement community had always been about getting the investors first and the building second. Preston Blake cross-examined him for an hour. He made Mercer admit he had pleaded guilty, admit he was hoping for a shorter sentence, admit he had lied to clients himself. It was a competent, grinding performance, and I watched the jury's faces go flat, and I knew Blake was doing what he did best, which was making the witness look like the villain and his client look like the company. Then Naomi called Cora Brody. Cora was 81, 4 feet 10 in her good shoes, and she needed a walker to reach the stand. She had been a schoolteacher for 39 years, and she spoke the way schoolteachers speak, clearly and slowly, as if she expected someone to take notes. She told the jury about the knock at her door and the young man with the kind smile who said he had seen her at church, about how he had offered to protect her from estate taxes, about how she had signed over her house because he had said it would keep her safe, and she had believed him. Because why would she not believe him? He had brought a notary. He had brought flowers. The courtroom was very quiet when she finished, and I looked across the aisle and saw my mother's face, and what I saw there was not hatred. It was the beginning of something worse, which was a crack. The next day it was Grandma's turn. She walked to the stand without the walker, because she refused it, and she sat up straight in the chair and placed her hands on the rail the way she placed them on her kitchen table, ready for what came next. Naomi asked her about the power of attorney, and Grandma answered in her clear, careful voice, and she told the jury about the allowance she had set up for Dylan, and about the flag she had placed on her own account, and about the 2 years of records she had kept in a shoebox on the top shelf of her closet. Then Preston Blake stood up. He adjusted his jacket and smiled at her, the warm smile he used on old women, and he said, "Mrs. Whitmore, you are 86 years old, is that right?" 85, Grandma said. "I will be 86 in September. Apologies. 85. And you live alone?" "I live alone, and I cook for myself, and I balance my checkbook, and I read the newspaper every morning." "I am not confused, young man. I have been waiting for this conversation for 2 years, and I am enjoying it far more than you are." There was a laugh from somewhere in the gallery, and Judge Whitfield tapped his gavel once, lightly, like a metronome. Blake's smile did not waver, but I saw his jaw tighten. "You gave your grandson power of attorney willingly, did you not?" "I did. I gave my grandson power of attorney to see what he would do with it." "And you admit you are biased against him, since you are the one who brought this complaint?" "Yes," Grandma said. "I am biased. I am the one he stole from." "That is not a conflict, young man. That is a credential." The jury was leaning forward, all 12 of them, like they were watching tennis. Blake tried again, and she answered again, and every answer was a clean shot over the net, and after 20 minutes he sat down with the same smile and the same tight jaw, and I realized I had been gripping Megan's hand so hard that my knuckles ached. Naomi rested. Blake called Dylan. Dylan looked like Dylan, that was the terrible thing. He took the stand in a dark suit, and he looked the jury in the eye, and he told them the scheme had been Carl Mercer's entirely, that he had been a victim of his own partner, and that his grandmother was an old woman being manipulated by a prosecutor who needed a headline. He cried a little at the right moment, one dry handkerchief pressed to the eye, and I watched my mother up in the gallery nodding along like he was testifying at a revival. Megan whispered, "He is good." I forgot how good he is. "He is good," I said. "It is the only talent that ever ran in our family." On redirect, Naomi Carter held up a single sheet of paper and asked Dylan if he recognized it. It was a letter to his grandmother's bank, typed on his company letterhead, telling them his grandmother's memory was failing and to disregard any calls she might make about her accounts. There was a typo in it, one word, and Naomi made him read it aloud, and when he read the typo, the whole courtroom heard him stumble on his own word, and the jury saw it, the small wrong spelling that he had made his whole life, and that Grandma had never once made in any letter she had ever written. That was the case. That was the whole case, really. Folded into one misspelled word, the jury was out for 2 days. Grandma played solitaire in the hallway and shared her cookies with the bailiff, whose name was Rick, and who told her she was the best-dressed witness he had seen in 15 years. Megan and I took shifts walking the hallway so she would not be alone. On the second afternoon, my mother walked past us, and she stopped, and she looked at Grandma for a long moment, and Grandma looked back at her, and neither of them said anything, and then my mother walked on, and I understood that some sentences take years to form and might never be spoken at all. On the third day, the jury came back, and the courtroom filled the way it fills on verdict days, everyone drawn to the sound. Judge Whitfield asked the foreman to rise, and the foreman, a woman in a blue sweater, read the verdicts in a flat voice, and each one was the same word: guilty. On every count, the fraud count, the theft count, the exploitation of an older adult. 7 victims, 7 guilties, and the word guilty landed 7 times like 7 nails. Courtney started to cry loudly, and my mother made a sound that was not a word, and Dylan's face did something I had never seen it do, which was nothing at all. He just sat there and stared at the table in front of him while Preston Blake put a hand on his shoulder, and I watched the whole thing from across the aisle and felt mostly nothing. And then I looked at Grandma, and Grandma was crying quietly, and she was smiling, and she was holding my hand. Judge Whitfield set sentencing for the following month, and then he did not adjourn. He sat forward, and the courtroom went very still because everyone could feel that the case was not over. "I have presided over this courtroom for 42 years, he said. "In that time, I have seen every kind of theft that one person can do to another, and I have seen families sit on both sides of the aisle and choose. I watched this trial closely. I watched the defendant's family sit behind him every single day, his mother, his father, his wife. Nobody questioned that choice because family loyalty is the story we tell ourselves about who we are." He paused, and he looked directly at our side of the gallery. "And I watched one woman sit alone on the other side of the aisle for the entire trial, with an 85-year-old woman in a navy cardigan holding her hand through every witness. That woman is not a witness. She is not a party. She is the one who walked into the Attorney General's office and filed a complaint against her own brother, knowing her family would never forgive her, and she did it anyway, because the people who had been hurt were old and invisible and counting on the law to see them when their own families would not." My heart was doing something strange in my chest. Megan was squeezing my arm. "Miss Rachel Price," the judge said, "will you stand up?" I stood up. My legs were not entirely steady. The judge looked at me over his glasses and he said, "In 42 years, I have never once asked a citizen to stand beside me on this bench. I am asking you now. Come up here and stand beside me." I walked up the aisle past the defense table, past Dylan, who would not look at me, past my mother, who was staring at the floor like she was reading something terrible written there. The bailiff, Rick, held the little gate open for me, and I went through it and I stood beside the judge's bench, looking down at the courtroom, at all those faces turned up at me like I was somebody. "You see this woman," Judge Whitfield said to the room. "Her family ignored her for 34 years, and she still chose them every single year, showing up with a pie and taking the seat nobody wanted. And when her brother asked her to help him hide a crime, she chose the law instead, and she sat here for 2 weeks with the victim and did not flinch. There is no conflict of interest worth your soul, ladies and gentlemen." I asked her to stand beside me so that every lawyer in this building who hears about this case will remember that. He looked down at me and his voice got quieter. "You have done this court a service, Miss Price. More than that, you have done justice a service. You can go back to your seat now. I just wanted everyone in this room to see you first." I walked back down the aisle and I was crying, the ugly crying again, and Grandma stood up and held her arms out and I bent into them, and Megan put her arms around both of us, and the three of us stood there in the middle of the courtroom on the wrong side of the aisle from everyone we loved, and for the first time in my life, the wrong side felt like the only side I had ever belonged on. Dylan was sentenced a month later to 8 years. The judge ordered restitution, $400,000, and he revoked the power of attorney in open court and said that an instrument of trust had been used as an instrument of theft. Carl Mercer got 3 years for his cooperation. The retirement community project collapsed, and the state unwound the contracts, and the 7 elderly clients were made whole out of the bond fund that covered the company, which was the closest thing to a clean ending that money can buy. My mother did not speak to me for a year. My father sent me one letter in the shaky handwriting of a man who had spent months in a basement, and it said, "Rachel, your mother does not know I am writing this. I knew about your brother before you did, and I did not look, and I am sorry. The judge was right about you. Please take care of your grandmother." I kept the letter in my nightstand drawer, and I read it on the bad days, and it helped a little, and it hurt a little too. Grandma got most of her money back, not all of it, because some of it was gone the way money goes, into boats and bonuses and the small bright things that people buy when they are spending somebody else's life. She did not seem to care. She told me the money was never the point, that she had watched Dylan her whole life and known what he was and had been waiting for him to show it, and that the best gift she had ever received was the look on his face when the jury said guilty for the 7th time. Megan started coming to Grandma's apartment every Sunday with coffee and crossword puzzles, and after a while I started coming too, and we made a new holiday out of a small kitchen table. That Thanksgiving, Grandma insisted on hosting. Just the 3 of us, and a turkey breast from the deli because nobody in that apartment knew how to roast a whole bird, and the lemon cookies, and a pie that Megan bought from a bakery and set on the table with a little flag in it, and Grandma raised her glass and said, "To the people who showed up." I thought about the judge asking me to stand beside him, and about how one stranger in a black robe had fixed something in me that 40 years of holidays could not touch. I thought about the big house on Maplewood Drive with its green carpet and its cardboard pie, and I felt the weight of it leave my shoulders the way you feel a heavy coat leave your back on the first warm day of spring. My family ignored me at Thanksgiving for 34 years. Then a judge asked me to stand beside him, and I have been standing up straight ever since.